beheading one of the Northmen with his axe before raising his shield as a hiss of arrows fell down on him and his Ironborn. Those of his men who were not ready for an attack were riddled with arrows. "Damn you, Theon," Victorian cursed as he slew another one of his foes. It had to have been his nephew. He had to get his men to form a shield wall if they hoped to have a chance to win this battle. "Shields!" Victorian roared, but all around him, his men were busy fighting their foes as their enemy slowly surrounded them. He spotted Red Ralph hacking at his foes as they continued to swarm him. He then heard the sounds of hooves in the distant and Victorian cursed as a cavalry of Northmen emerged from the woods with lances and swords in hand. Stark! Winterfell! The Northmen screamed as they charged and wheeled, then charged and wheeled again, chopping his Ironborn to pieces as they tried to form up a shield wall. This was not how it was supposed to be, Victorian thought as he swung his axe down on a Northerner's head, then pulled it out as blood gushed out of the man's head. It was them who were supposed to have the element of surprise, not the Northerners. He took out his dirk and slammed it into the neck of one of his foes while beheading another with his axe. If he was to go down today, Victorian would make sure that he took the commander of these Northerners with him. Even amongst all this chaos, Victorian would not rest until he met the commander of his foes. Victorian roared as he hacked down two more Northmen with his axe, cleaving their heads right off of their bodies. How many of them were even left? He took a second to look behind him, and to his fury, he saw his men being forced into the river as their lines broke against the Northern cavalry. On the river, his ships were being captured instead of being burned as the crews left on board were being slaughtered. Looking back around, Victorian had no time to react as a great big black beast with dark golden eyes fell on him and knocked his weapons out of his hands. "Leave him to me!" A voice called out, and the beast that had attacked him left him on the ground. As the screams of his men and the howls of the wolves echoed around him, Victorian struggled to get up as he looked up at his foe. A black knight approached him, but even in the darkness, with the moonlight shining down on them, he could tell that the great sword his foe wielded was Valyrian steel. "I have failed you, brother," Victorian thought as his foe stopped before him. "That's Victorian Greyjoy," one of the wolves behind the Black Knight said while he heard the growl of the black beast that had attacked him. "He won't be for long," the Black Knight said as he raised his great dark sword over Victorian. "Tell your drowned god that Brynden Stark of Winterfell sent you to his halls." The flash of black ripples was the last thing Victorian saw. Black Wolf! Black Wolf! Stark! Stark! Black Wolf! Stark! So this was what victory felt like. Brynden grinned as he raised the head of the Lord Captain Victorian Greyjoy into the air. His men cheered while war horns sounded and Shadow howled with them. On the Fever River, Brynden saw the men he had sent to capture the ships, waving the banners of House Stark on the decks of the ships while tossing the bodies of the Ironborn overboard. Even from afar, he could hear them all chanting his name and the Black Wolf, as some had taken to calling him after the battle. Along the shorelines were the bodies of the Ironborn that had fought to the last man against the cavalry charge. Brynden liked the name they had given him. Brynden the Black Wolf. It reminded him of his own namesake's nickname, Sir Brynden the Blackfish. It felt good to have finally won his first battle. Was this how Robb had felt in the Whispering Wood and at the camps? He wished that Robb could have been here to witness his victory, but he was still in the Riverlands, fighting against the Lannisters to secure their new kingdom. Though Brynden had not forgiven Robb for sending Theon back to Pike, it was because of his blunder that they now had their own fleet to use as they wished. It would not be long before news of this battle spread across the north. With the Iron Fleet now under their control, they now had one of three most powerful fleets of Westeros to command. Brynden was no sailor or captain, but he was certain that White Harbor had men capable of commanding their new ships. He would have to send a raven to Lord Marndaeli to ask for sailors. They would need them for when Brynden planned to attack the Iron Islands in retaliation for their attempted attack on Moat Cailin. Robb would also need to be informed of his battle against the Ironborn on the Fever River. Hopefully then, Robb would realize that he never should have trusted or befriended Theon Greyjoy when he learned of what happened here. Even with the taste of victory in the air, Brynden couldn't help but wonder how many men they had lost in the battle. He was certain that the Ironborn had suffered the most when they had attacked, for they had not been expecting the Northerners to attack them. It had been Sir Kyle's idea to send the heads of the Ironborn Outriders back to their camp before beginning the attack. With his guards falling into line behind him, Brynden made his way over to where his fellow commanders were. "A fine victory, my prince," Robert Glover congratulated as he joined them with Shadow by his side. "I hear that you took the head of the Lord Captain after the battle. He would have made a fine prisoner to be used against Balon Greyjoy." "I meant what I said when we were to take no prisoners," Brynden told him. "Highborn or lowborn, they were Ironborn, and deserved to be put down like dogs when they decided to attack us. The Lannisters would share the same fate if Brynden ever got the chance to face them in battle. Until they no longer had any use for the Kingslayer, Brynden would have to let him live until Robb decided otherwise." "Of course, my prince," Robert bowed. "I meant no disrespect." "No matter," Brynden waved off. "How many men did we lose?" "We are still counting our losses," my prince, Sir Kyle said, "but so far they number over 1,000. Lord Serwyn and Hornwood are among them." "Lord Hornwood's son perished in the Whispering Woods, if I recall," Brynden frowned. Lord Hornwood had been distraught when he had learned the news of his son's death. Now that Lord Hornwood had followed his son to the grave, Brynden wondered who was next in the line of succession to succeed him as the Lord of the Hornwood. "Do we know who will succeed Lord Hornwood?" "Lord Hornwood has another son, my prince, a bastard," Robert Glover told him. "He is being fostered at Deepwood Motte." "A bastard cannot inherit unless he is legitimized by a royal decree," Brynden pointed out. He knew all about bastards and their rights during his time spent with Jon Snow and his mother. Yet Robb was now their king and he had the power to legitimize Lord Hornwood's bastard. "Still, I will ask Robb to consider legitimizing Lord Hornwood's bastard when I have the chance." "Thank you, my prince," Robert bowed. "What should we do with the ships that are now under our control?" Sir Willis asked. "It would not be wise to leave them here on the Fever River, so far south." "We shall sail them to Deepwood Motte," Brynden replied. "It is close to the sea and we can anchor the ships around the Bay of Ice." He would have considered Seaguard, but with the Riverlands overrun with Lannisters, he didn't want to take chance of their ships being either burned or captured by their foes if they decided to attack Seaguard. Their ships would be much safer in the north where there wasn't much fighting going on. "I want a raven sent to Sir Helman and inform him to escort our prisoner to the Fever River." "You do not want to leave him at Moat Cailin?" Robert asked, and Brynden shook his head. "I want to keep our prisoner as far away from the south as possible. Moat Cailin may be secured, but it would not be wise to keep the Kingslayer in one place for too long." "As you say, my prince," Sir Kyle said. "I will send some riders to Moat Cailin to escort the prisoner here." "See to it at once," Sir Kyle, Brynden told him. "Once we have our men loaded onto the ships, we will set sail for Deepwood Motte." Sir Kyle bowed and left the tent. "The rest of you are dismissed." He looked at his guards and nodded his head. "That means you as well." "My prince." They bowed their heads and left along with his bannerman. Once he was alone with Shadow, Brynden smiled at his wolf as Shadow padded over to him and rested his head on his lap. "You did well out there," he told his wolf while scratching his ear. Shadow's presence in the battle had caused the horses on the Ironborn side to go wild when Brynden had set him loose on their lines. The darkness had been the perfect cover for Shadow to strike fear into the enemy lines. A while later, Brynden was on board one of the ships along with their prisoner as they prepared to set sail into the Sunset Sea. They would have to take it slowly, for they didn't have many experienced sailors in their army. When they reached Deepwood Motte, Brynden would have to remind himself to send a raven to Lord Marndaly, asking for sailors and captains. Brynden smiled as they set off down the Fever River. For the first time since Brandon the Burner, the North had strength at sea once more. Chapter 8, Wolf in the Night. Shout out to new reviewers: Gravio, Robert Ack 99, December Best, Jack Blackie, Hi guests, and to returning reviewer, Titan. As always, enjoy and review. The King in the North. The King in the North. His men chanted as Robb made his way through the camp while they celebrated his victory at Oxcross, with Grey Wind by his side. It was moments like these that Robb wished Brynden was here with him to relish the taste of victory, but his brother was holding Moat Cailin with a host of 10,000 men at his back. Brynden had made the right call to fortify the defences of Moat Cailin instead of remaining at the causeway. Robb knew his brother would rather be here shedding the blood of the Lannisters with him, but Brynden was the only one he trusted to hold the North against their enemies. Brynden had always been the better warrior than Robb, and right now Robb needed his skill to defend the north while he was fighting in the west. Just as Lord Tywin Lannister had done to the Riverlands, Robb was going to raid the Westerlands, and pay them back in kind for the damage the Lannisters had done to the Riverlands. Hopefully that would get Lord Tywin's attention and force him to leave the walls of Harrenhal and take to the field if he did not want to be seen as weak by his bannermen. My first rule of war is to never give the enemy his wish, the Blackfish had told Robb before he had decided to attack the Westerlands instead of Harrenhal, leaving his uncle Edmure in command of Riverrun. If his attack in the west did not work, then hopefully his mother would be able to secure an alliance with King Renly Baratheon and lure Lord Tywin out of Harrenhal when he marched on to King's Landing. From what the Blackfish's scouts had reported, King Renly had a host of 100,000 men at his back, all from the Reach and the Stormlands. Sooner or later, Lord Tywin would have to make a move, and when he did, Robb would be ready for him. With the second Lannister host under Sir Stafford Lannister destroyed, there was no real force left in the Westerlands to oppose Robb and his men now. Should Theon manage to secure an alliance with Lord Balon Greyjoy, Robb would be able to use the Iron Fleet to attack Lannisport and Casterly Rock. Brynden would not be pleased with his decision when he learned that Robb had sent Theon to Pike, but Robb trusted Theon and knew that he would not fail him. Robb could understand why his brother despised Theon, even when father had first brought the heir to the Iron Islands to Winterfell after Greyjoy's rebellion. Brynden had instantly taken a disliking to Theon. Brynden had disliked Theon simply because he was an Ironborn, the people responsible for forcing their father to go to war, and had never taken the time to get to know him like Robb had. Brynden would always voice his disapproval when he saw how close Robb was with Theon. Robb hoped that when this war was over, Brynden would see that Theon was different from the other Ironborn their father had fought against in Greyjoy's rebellion. "Your Grace." Robb turned around to see who had addressed him and saw that it was Lord Rickard Karstark. The man had been filled with grief ever since the deaths of his sons, Eddard and Torrhen. The Lord of Carhold had not at all been pleased when Robb had decided to send the Kingslayer to Moat Cailin, but was relieved when he had learned that his eldest son and heir, Haryon, was alive and well. "What is it?" Robb asked. "What should we do with the prisoners we captured during the battle?" Even with the knowledge of his eldest son's well-being, Robb could tell that Lord Rickard still hungered for more Lannister blood. During the Battle of Oxcross, Lord Rickard had slain Sir Stafford Lannister while he was running after his horse. "We'll send them to Seaguard, and from there Lord Mallister will send them to Moat Cailin." They had taken many highborn hostages after the battle: Sir Limond Vicary, Lord Roland Crickehall, Lord Anteri Ojast, Martin Lannister, and 100 more. Robb doubted he would be able to trade any of them for Sansa or Arya, but they could become useful should any of his commanders be captured in battle. Brynden would not like it, but his brother had made a point when he told them their prisoners would be more secured if they were in the north than the Riverlands. "Understood." Lord Rickard bowed and took his leave. Robb turned around and continued down the path to his tent, with Grey Wind trailing behind him. Robb owed this victory to Grey Wind, for it had been his wolf that had discovered a secret goat path, letting them slip past the Golden Tooth and into the Westerlands undetected. With the Blackfish and his Outriders' aid, they had struck Sir Stafford's host in the night. Now more than ever, Robb was certain the old gods had sent the direwolves to him and his siblings as their guardians. He would not have won this victory had it not been for Grey Wind. The flap of the tent opened and Robb looked over as the Blackfish entered. "Your Grace, pardon the intrusion, but you told me to come to you when I found out where the remnants of Sir Stafford's host had fled to." "It's all right, Uncle," Robb said, setting down his crown, the crown once worn by the Kings of Winter, forged by his grandfather's smith. "Where have they fled to?" "My scouts reported they have fled to Lannisport, Your Grace, though I doubt they will be much of a threat. Other than Casterly Rock and Lannisport, the other castles are lightly defended. We won't meet much resistance here now that Sir Stafford's host has been destroyed. I'll inform my bannermen of the news. Continue to screen our movements and scout ahead. Should Lord Tywin decide to march west, I want us to have a position where we can ambush his army. I will see to it at once." The Blackfish bowed and left the tent. It would not be wise to stay in one place for too long, and Robb knew they would need to march again. His bannermen had made him their king, and he would be a good king to them, as honorable as father, strong, just, loyal to his friends and brave when he faced his enemies. Robb just hoped that Theon and his mother managed to secure an alliance with Lord Balon or King Renly. There was no turning back now. Theon had made his choice when he had decided to serve his father and prove that he was a true Ironborn. "I am a Greyjoy, not a Stark," Theon had told himself after he had displayed the headless bodies of the children before the castle. Old Nan stood with her soft toothless mouth opening and closing soundlessly, and Farlin threw himself at Theon, snarling like one of his hounds. Urzen and Cadwyle had to beat him senseless with the butts of their spears. How did I come to this? He remembered thinking as he stood over the fly-speckled bodies. He had restless sleeps ever since, his dreams always filled with nightmares. Bran and Rickon had given him no choice, Theon told himself, as they had been unable to find them after losing their trail. Let the rest of them believe they were dead, but Theon knew the truth. Theon was still not at all pleased with his sister Asha when she had brought only 20 men with her. How did she expect him to hold Winterfell with only this lot, Theon had asked his sister. 10, Asha corrected. The others return with me. You wouldn't want your own sweet sister to brave the dangers of the wood without an escort, would you? There are dire wolves prowling the dark. She uncoiled from the great stone seat and rose to her feet. Come, let us go somewhere we can speak more privily. Dagmer's lost the fight at Torrens Square, Theon blurted out as they made their way to Ned Stark's solar. The old Castellan broke his shield wall, yes, Asha said calmly. What did you expect? This Sir Roderick knows the land intimately, as the Cleftjaw does not, and many of the Northmen were mounted. The Ironborn lack the discipline to stand a charge of armored horse. Dagmer lives, be grateful for that much. He's leading the survivors back toward the stony shore. She knows more than I do, Theon realized. That only made him angrier. The victory has given Leopold Tallheart the courage to come out from behind his walls and join Sir Roderick. And I've had reports that Lord Marndaly has sent a dozen barges upriver packed with knights, war horses, and siege engines. The Umbers are gathering beyond the last river as well. I'll have an army at my gates before the moon turns, and you bring me only 10 men. You'll have more than that soon enough when Brynden Stark learns what you have done, Asha told him. Brynden Stark. Why did Theon have to worry about a Stark who was at the Twins? Why should I worry about Brynden Stark? You didn't hear. Brynden Stark has defeated our uncle on the Fever River and has captured the Iron Fleet. How? Theon had not worried about Brynden Stark when he had heard about his host travelling to the Twins with Lord Bolton before he had left for Seaguard with Lord Mallister and his son. It had to have been Brynden's doing that Theon did not know about his true whereabouts. The Black Wolf fell on our uncle as they disembarked from their ships. The only way Brynden Stark could have known about our uncle's attack was if he had sent outriders to the West Asher side. With Moat Cailin still in the Stark's control, it will not be long before he sets his eyes on Winterfell and Deepwood Motte. And with your folly with the Stark boys, I have no doubt he will be marching on to Winterfell with the intent of taking your head, Theon. If only you'd had the good sense to raise the castle and carry the 2 little princelings back to Pike as hostages, you might have won the war in a stroke, and we wouldn't be in this situation. You'd like that, wouldn't you? To see my prize reduced to ruins and ashes. Your prize will be the doom of you. Krakens rise from the sea, Theon, or did you forget that during your years among the wolves? Our strength is in our longships. Deepwood Motte sits close enough to the sea for supplies and fresh men to reach me whenever they are needful. But Winterfell is hundreds of leagues inland, ringed by woods, hills, and hostile holdfasts and castles. And every man in 1,000 leagues is your enemy now, make no mistake. You made certain of that when you mounted those heads on your gatehouse. Asha shook her head. How could you be such a bloody fool? Children. They defied me, he shouted in her face. And it was blood for blood besides, 2 sons of Eddard Stark to pay for Roderick and Meryn. The words tumbled out heedlessly, but Theon knew at once that his father would approve. I've laid my brothers' ghosts to rest. Our brothers, Asha reminded him, with a half-smile that suggested she took his talk of vengeance well salted. Did you bring their ghosts from Pike, brother? And here I thought they haunted only father. When has a maid ever understood a man's need for revenge? Even if his father did not appreciate the gift of Winterfell, he must approve of Theon avenging his brothers. Asha snorted back a laugh. This Sir Roderick and Brynden Stark may well feel the same manly need, Did you think of that? You are blood of my blood, Theon, whatever else you may be. For the sake of the mother who bore us both, return to Deepwood Motte with me. Put Winterfell to the torch and fall back while you still can. No. Theon adjusted his crown. I took this castle and I mean to hold it. His sister looked at him a long time. Then hold it you shall, she said, for the rest of your life. She sighed. I say it tastes like folly, but what would a shy maid know of such things? At the door she gave him one last mocking smile. You ought to know, that's the ugliest crown I've ever laid eyes on. Did you make it yourself? She left him fuming, and lingered no longer than was needful to feed and water her horses. Half the men she'd brought returned with her as threatened, riding out the same hunter's gate that Bran and Rickon had used for their escape. Theon watched them go from atop the wall. As his sister vanished into the mists of the Wolfswood he found himself wondering why he had not listened and gone with her. Theon knew how much Brynden Stark disliked him, and if he did learn what he had done, Theon doubted that even Winterfell would be able to protect him from his fury. They had come across 8 longships near the stony shore as they were sailing up to Deepwood Motte. Brynden could not remember who had been more surprised when their forces had clashed on the sea, his Northmen or the Ironborn. Their numbers were few while Brynden had 8,000 men and the decks of their ships were loaded with Scorpions and Spitfires. They had overwhelmed the Ironborn with superior numbers, but this time, Brynden had decided to capture some of them to find out why they were here. Moat Cailin had been where the Ironborn first planned to attack, but he had no idea why there were more Ironborn ships off their coasts, and he planned to find out what they were doing here. Keeping their ships anchored off the stony shore, Brynden kept their prisoners chained on the coast to watch as he planted the heads of the Ironborn he had fought on the Fever River off the shorelines, just as his ancestor King Theon Stark had done to deter future invaders. He saved the head of Victorian Greyjoy for last, enjoying the looks of despair on his captives as they saw the head of their Lord Captain. Don't worry, you'll be next, Brynden told them once they were done. But first, I want some answers. You will get none from us, said a tall and thin man, with fierce black eyes and a beak of a nose, garbed in mottled robes of green and grey and blue, the swirling colors of the drowned god. A water skin hung under his arm on a leather strap, and ropes of dried seaweed were braided through his waist-long black hair and untrimmed beard. Shadow barred his teeth and prowled around the prisoners. Sir Kyle Condon stood beside Brynden. Ever since Lord Sewin's death, Sir Kyle had become Brynden's right-hand man and commander of his outriders. I say we just kill them all and be done with them, my prince. Sir Kyle looked at Shadow and smiled. Or we could always feed them to your wolf. My wolf deserves better than squid, Brynden told Sir Kyle while the captives gave a fearful look to Shadow as he growled at them. Still, it's not a bad idea. Why give them a quick death when we can watch as my wolf slowly eats them alive? Brynden unsheathed ice for his prisoners to see. This was the sword that killed your Lord Captain. Tell me what your purpose here is and I will give you a quick death. If not, I'll feed you one by one to my wolf. Several of the prisoners looked at each other while the one who had spoken remained calm despite the situation they were in. Should none of them speak, Brynden would make certain that man would be the first he would feed to Shadow. He was in no mood to wait, as he needed to find a secure spot to anchor his ships in the north. When none of them spoke, Brynden frowned and sheathed ice. Bring the priest forward, Brynden ordered. Before his guards stepped forward, a shout called out to them and Brynden turned around as a rider urged his horse toward them. Summon the prince, he called. I am here, Brynden announced as he approached the rider, motioning for his guards to stand down. My prince. The rider spurred his mount closer. Several of our outriders have reported seeing Ironborn fleeing toward our position. Do they know where they were fleeing from? Torrens Square, my prince. Reavers, Brynden realized as he looked back at their prisoners. It was no wonder they were so few in numbers when Brynden and his men fell on them. They must have been waiting for their fellow Ironborn to return from their raid, not expecting that an entire northern fleet would chance upon them. Then again, Brynden couldn't help but feel there was a reason they were here other than reaving after the battle on the Fever River. They would never have dared attack the north unless they knew about the Iron Fleet's assault on Moat Cailin. Still, why attack Moat Cailin and send reavers to raid the coastlines? How many men did you see? Brynden asked. 50, the rider replied. Brynden turned to Sir Kyle. Send out our riders to greet them and slaughter them all, no prisoners. It will be done, my prince. Sakyle bowed and took his leave. What should we do with this lot? Small Janumber asked, towering over the prisoners. Behead them and place their heads on spikes along with the rest, Brynden replied. That ought to send a message to any future Ironborn raiders who decide to attack our lands. Smalljan grinned. I'll see to it at once. Brynden left Smalljan to the beheading while heading back to where the boats were aligned on the shorelines, with Shadow trailing behind him. Not for the first time, Brynden wondered if his father would approve of the way he treated his prisoners. He doubted he would, but father was not here, and it was up to him to decide the fate of the Ironborn he captured. Every Ironborn that he had killed, Brynden had treated them like they were a Lannister, taking his frustration and anger out on them. Why did he have to clean up the mess that Robb had caused? It should be Robb ridding the north of the Ironborn, not him. Brynden didn't even know where his brother was or what he was even doing. Had it not been for their mother warning Brynden about Theon being sent to Pike, he doubted he would even be here on the Stony Shore. Where are you, Theon? Brynden was certain Theon had betrayed them, yet Theon was not on the Fever River or the Stony Shore. Theon had betrayed them, but he was too craven to show himself. If he wasn't in the north, Brynden would sail the Sunset Sea if he had to and raise the Iron Islands to find Theon. Wherever you are, Theon, I will find you and have you answer for your crimes. Together, with Shadow and his guards, they clambered into a boat and made their way back to where their ships were anchored. It had been the Ironborn's unlucky day that Brynden had fell on them, but Brynden still couldn't shake the feeling they were there for a reason. The bulk of the Ironborn force was gone and their ships captured, but why would there be raiders on the Stony Shore? He knew he was overthinking it and decided to focus his attention on getting their new fleet to Deepwood Motte. Welcome back, my prince, Robert Glover greeted as Brynden boarded the ship with his guards and Shadow. I trust the Ironborn are taken care of. Their heads are now on display on our shorelines, Brynden told him. Where is Sakyle? Leading our cavalry against a small force of raiders that had attacked Torrens Square. They will be dealt with soon enough and Sakyle will return to the ship. Once he returns, we set sail for Deepwood Motte. You will get to see your family again soon. Goran and Irina. Robert smiled. I have you to thank for that, my prince. Thank the new fleet we have, Brynden said. Had the Iron Fleet not attacked, we'd most likely still be at Moat Cailin, waiting for orders from our king. You wish you were fighting alongside your brother, don't you? I do. I had wanted our first battle to be together, but Robb decided to send me off to fight against Lord Tywine Lannister. He could have chosen a more experienced commander to face Lord Tywine, but he chose me. It had been the Whispering Woods and the camps Brynden had wanted to fight in with his brother, not the massacre and being left to guard Moat Cailin against their enemies. He was born to be a warrior like Jon, not a battle commander like Robb and their father. You're his brother, that's why he chose you to lead the other host. Brynden remembered back at Winterfell when Robert had demanded the honor of battle command with a smile and a jest. It felt like so long ago when they had been fighting for their father's freedom and now they were fighting to break away from the rule of the Iron Throne. Doesn't mean that I have to like it, Brynden muttered. There were times when Brynden often wondered if things had been different had Robb decided to capture Lord Tywine instead of the Kingslayer. They could have ended the war in one strike if they had committed all of their forces on Lord Tywine. Robb had chosen the more cautious route, but even with the Kingslayer as their prisoner did not stop Lord Tywine from continuing his attacks against them. Lord Tywine was the true power of House Lannister, not the Kingslayer. We all have to do things sometimes we don't like, Robert told him. I know, Brynden sighed. How fares our prisoner anyway? We give him food and water when he needs it, but most of the time we keep him chained to the wall and guarded day and night. The Kingslayer would have to be a fool if he tried to escape on board a ship in this condition. He wouldn't be the first, Brynden muttered, remembering Bitter Steel. Sir Igor Rivers, a bastard of King Aegon the Unworthy, had been sent to the Wall to join the Night's Watch, but his ship had been intercepted, returning the man back to the Golden Company. Had it been up to Brynden, he would have executed the man then and there. I doubt he'll get the chance, Robert chuckled. My prince. Brynden recognized the voice belonged to Harry on Karstark and turned his attention onto him. What is it? Sakyle has returned and all the Ironborn that had fled Torrens Square are dead. We did not lose any men in the encounter. Good. Once Sakyle and his men are on board, we set sail for Deepwood Motte. We've wasted enough time here. As you command. Harry bowed and took his leave. Leave me, Robert. I wish to spend some time alone. Brindon ordered. Of course, my prince. Robert bowed and left Brindon alone on the deck of the ship. Once their ships were safely anchored off Deepwood Motte, Brindon planned to go to Winterfell afterward. It would be good to see Bran and Rickon again. He was certain they would be surprised when they saw him. Bran would want to hear stories about what he had seen in the south, and Shadow would be reunited with his little mates Summer and Shaggydoag. He knew Maester Lewin and Sir Roderick would not want him to leave when he returned. As Robb's heir, Brindon would become the Prince of Winterfell. It was a title he knew would not last for long after Robb was wed. Brindon smiled at the thought of Robb having to marry one of those free girls. Robb had certainly not been happy after their mother had told him he would have to marry one of Lord Walder Frey's daughters. Brindon was just glad their mother had not arranged a betrothal for him. A second son was not as tempting to marry as the firstborn, for which Brindon was glad Lord Frey had not betrothed him to any of his daughters. Sooner or later, though, Brindon knew he would have to marry. He just hoped that it wouldn't be anytime soon. After the last of their men returned, they resumed their course for Deepwood Motte. Brindon remained in his cabin with Shadow for most of the journey when calls for battle were heard outside. What is going on? Brindon burst out of his cabin as men were rushing to arm the Scorpions and Spitfires. Robert, what's happening? Brindon shouted. Ironborn ships, my prince, off the coast of Deepwood Motte. Robert shouted back. More of them, Brindon growled as he went to arm himself. Looks like he had another battle to win before he saw Bran and Rickon again. Damn her brother, Asha cursed not for the first time as she rode through the Wolf's Wood with her men back to Deepwood Motte. Could he not see that the North was lost now that the North still held Moat Cailin? If Moat Cailin was still held by the North, Asha knew it was only a matter of time before the Starks learned about the captures of Deepwood Motte and Winterfell. If Brindon Stark was still in command, she had no doubt he would be leading his men to retake Winterfell, giving Asha the time to prepare for an attack. It was then she heard the sound of a war horn and a wolf howling. Something was not right. She turned to Rolf the dwarf and Roggan Rustbeard, her best riders, who had come with her to Winterfell. Scout ahead and make sure our way is clear. I want no surprises when we reach Deepwood Motte. If you come on wolves, ride back to me with word. If we must, promised Roggan through his huge red beard. Now she was only left with 7 riders as they resumed their march. A while later, something flew from the brush to land with a soft thump in their midst, bumping and bouncing. It was round and dark and wet, with long hair that whipped about it as it rolled. When it came to rest amongst the roots of an oak, Grimtongue said, Rolf the dwarf's not so tall as he once was. Then the trees erupted all around them, and the Northmen poured in howling. Wolves, she thought, they howl like bloody wolves. The war cry of the North. Her Ironborn screamed back at them, and the fight began. The first man to come at Asha Greyjoy died at her feet with her throwing axe between his eyes. That gave her respite enough to slip her shield onto her arm. To me, she called, but whether she was calling to her own men or the foes even Asha could not have said for certain. A Northman with an axe loomed up before her, swinging with both hands as he howled in wordless fury. Asha raised her shield to block his blow, then shoved in close to gut him with her dirk. His howling took on a different tone as he fell. She spun and found another wolf behind her, and slashed him across the brow beneath his helm. His own cut caught her below the breast, but her mail turned it, so she drove the point of her dirk into his throat and left him to drown in his own blood. A hand seized her hair, but short as it was he could not get a good enough grip to wrench her head back. Asha slammed her boot heel down onto his instep and wrenched loose when he cried out in pain. By the time she turned, the man was down and dying, still clutching a handful of her hair. Carl stood over him, with his long sword dripping and moonlight shining in his eyes. Grimtongue was counting the Northmen as he killed them, calling out, 4 as one went down and 5 a heartbeat later. 7 shouted Grimtongue, but beside him Loren Longacre sprawled with one leg twisted under him, and the wolves kept on coming, shouting and rustling. Asha pushed her dirk into a Northman's chest through fur and wool and boiled leather. His face was so close to hers that she could smell the sour stench of his breath, and his hand was at her throat. Asher felt iron scraping against bone as her point slid over a rib. Then the man shuddered and died. When she let go of him, she was so weak she almost fell on top of him. Later, she stood back to back with Kull, listening to the grunts and curses all around them, to brave men crawling through the shadows weeping for their mothers. A wolf drove at her with a spear long enough to punch through her belly and Kull's back as well, pinning them together as they died. Better that than die alone, she thought, but her cousin Quentin killed the spearman before he reached her. A heartbeat later another wolf killed Quentin, driving an axe into the base of his skull. Behind her grim tongue shouted, "Nine, and damn you all." Somewhere in the ebb and flow of battle, Asher lost Kull, lost Triss, lost all of them. Her dirk was gone as well, and all her throwing axes. Instead she had a sword in hand, a short sword with a broad thick blade, almost like a butcher's cleaver. For her life she could not have said where she had gotten it. Her arm ached, her mouth tasted of blood, her legs were trembling, and shafts of pale dawn light were slanting through the trees. Has it been so long? How long have we been fighting? Her last foe was a Northman with an axe, a big man bald and bearded, clad in a byrnie of patched and rusted mail that could only mean he was a chief or champion. He was not pleased to find himself fighting a woman. "Cunt," he roared each time he struck at her, his spittle dampening her cheeks. "Cunt! Cunt!" Asher wanted to shout back at him, but her throat was so dry she could do no more than grunt. His axe was shivering her shield, cracking the wood on the downswing, tearing off long pale splinters when he wrenched it back. Soon she would have only a tangle of kindling on her arm. She backed away and shook free of the ruined shield, then backed away some more and danced left and right and left again to avoid the down-rushing axe. And then her back came up hard against a tree, and she could dance no more. The wolf raised the axe above his head to split her head in two. Asher tried to slip to her right, but her feet were tangled in some roots, trapping her. She twisted, lost her footing, and the axe head crunched against her temple with a scream of steel on steel. The world went red and black and red again. Pain crackled up her leg like lightning, and far away she heard her Northman say, "You bloody cunt," as he lifted up his axe for the blow that would finish her. A wolf howled in the distance. That's wrong, she thought. There are no wolves in the drowned goddess' watery halls. Below the waves the merlings hail their lord by blowing into seashells. She dreamt of a black wolf with dark golden eyes emerging from the woods. Chapter 9, Homecoming. Here is the final chapter of the second book. I had planned for there to be 5 like the last one, but decided to end the second book with 4 chapters. I just realized that if you focus writing mainly on one storyline, you can breeze through the books pretty quickly. Next book though we will see some stuff in the south because of the changes Bryndon's presence has made. Shout out to new reviewers, though, C.E.W, Onigzeda98, Chase Manina, Master of Dragons God, Scon, Idring Stellar Twa 123, Blaze 1992, Zakan, and to returning reviewers, Warsage, Titan, Vandal, and guests. Enjoy and review. The prince's host departed Deepwood Motte by the light of a golden dawn, uncoiling from behind the log palisades like a long, steel serpent emerging from its nest, leaving Asher's captured ships and those of the Iron Fleet taken from the Fever River behind, anchored on the tidal flats to the north of Deepwood, where Asher had landed before capturing the castle. Pikemen, archers, great masses of men at arms on foot, and 1,000 lancers and mounted bowmen, rode out with their black wolf, clad in furs and boiled leather and old mail. Back of the main column the baggage train followed, mules, horses, oxen, a mile of wains and carts laden with food, fodder, tents, and other provisions. Last the rear guard more northern cavalry, with a screening of outriders following half hidden to make certain no foe could steal up on them unawares. Even in the north, the prince was cautious and took no chances when it came to their march on to Winterfell. Asher Greyjoy rode in the baggage train, in a covered wain with 2 huge iron-rimmed wheels, fettered at wrist and ankle and watched over day and night along with the Kingslayer, though the prince would sometimes bring her into his bed, even though they were enemies. Asher was certain it was because she was Theon's sister, and the prince took pleasure knowing he was fucking Theon's sister. Still, Prince Bryndon was taking no chances on his prize escaping captivity and kept her chained to his bed while he had his way with her. He meant to carry her to Winterfell, to display her there in chains for the lords of the north to see, the Kraken's daughter bound and broken, proof of his power. Warhorn saw the column on its way. Spear points shone in the light of the rising sun, and all along the verges the grass glistened with the morning frost. Between Deepwood Motte and Winterfell lay 100 leagues of forest. 300 miles as the raven flies. We should have been at Winterfell by now, some of the Northmen told each other. Sir Roderick will take the castle by the time we get there, Asher heard Small Janumber complain. He had fought with the Black Wolf on the Green Fork, the Fever River, Stony Shore, and Deepwood Motte. The young wolf would have been at Winterfell's gates by now. Brynden is more cautious than Robb Stark, Harry on Karstark defended. The prince lives in his brother's shadow, Asher thought. Her ankle still gave a stab of pain whenever she tried to put her weight on it. Something was broken down inside, Asher did not doubt. The swelling had gone down at Deepwood, but the pain remained. A sprain would surely have healed by now. Her irons clacked every time she moved. The fetters chafed at her wrists and at her pride. But that was the cost of submission. No man has ever died from bending his knee, her father had once told her. He who kneels may rise again, blade in hand. He who will not kneel stays dead, stiff legs and all. Balon Greyjoy had proved the truth of his own words when his first rebellion failed. The Kraken bent the knee to Stag and Direwolf, only to rise again when Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark were dead. And so at Deepwood the Kraken's daughter had done the same when she was dumped before the prince, bound and limping, though blessedly unraped, her ankle a blaze of pain. I yield, my prince, I ask only that you spare my men. Only 2 of her men had survived the wolf's wood. Only 2 remained of the 1,000 men she had brought with her to conquer Deepwood Motte. Brynden had given her their lives. Yet she sensed no true mercy in the man. He cares not about her people, and her life meant little and less to him. She was only his hostage and bed-warmer, a prize to show the North that the Ironborn were all but vanquished from the North. All that remained of the Ironborn in the North were the ones with Theon at Winterfell. From what Asher had heard from the men on the march, Sir Roderick had returned from Torrhen's Square with 2,000 men and had laid siege to the castle. When Brynden Stark joined his forces with Sir Roderick's, Theon would be facing an army of 10,000. Her brother was a fool if he believed he would be able to hold Winterfell against a host of that size. 6 days had passed since they had left Deepwood Motte, and here and there they wound their way past familiar landmarks, a stony hill that looked a bit like a wolf's head when seen from a certain angle, a half-frozen waterfall, a natural stone arch bearded with grey-green moss. Asher knew them all. She had come this way before, riding to Winterfell to persuade her brother Theon to abandon his conquest and return with her to the safety of Deepwood Motte. I failed in that as well. On the 7th day of the march, Asher was brought once more into the prince's bed. If they had not been enemies, Asher would not have minded being his lover, for he was a lot better than most of her lovers she had shared her bed with. He sucked her nipples till she cried out, half in pain and half in pleasure. He fucked her till she screamed, and then again until she wept, before he finally spent his seed inside her womb. How will my brother die? Asher asked when they were done, while Brynden climbed out of bed and poured himself a flagon of wine. As much as I would love to behead your brother, I must hold him prisoner until my brother tells me what to do with him. And what of me? How long will you keep me in your bed before you decide you no longer need me to pleasure you? You live only because Lady Glover pleaded for me to spare you. You're lucky you're a woman and not a man, otherwise I would not have hesitated to take your life as I did with your uncle. When I am through with your brother and the Iron Islands, you will be the last of the Ironborn, my lady. Damn you, Theon, Brynden cursed as his forces arrived at Winterfell. The winter town he remembered bustling with people before he and Robb had marched south was in ruins, with bodies littering the streets. He recognized some of the badges of the slain men, the Sawin battle axe, tall heart trees, Merman from White Harbor, the bull moose of the Hornwoods, Flints, Karstarks, and the direwolves of Stark. How could this have happened? Sir Roderick had over 2,000 men, and from what Brynden had been told, Theon had only 50 men holding Winterfell. The catapults and scorpions Sir Roderick's host had brought with them were torched. Search for any survivors, Brynden ordered his men as he made his way to the ruined castle that had once been Winterfell, his home. Shadow trailed behind him as he made his way through the ruins. The great granite walls remained, blackened here and there by fire but otherwise untouched. But within, all was death and destruction. The doors of the great hall were charred and smouldering, and inside the rafters had given way and the whole roof had crashed down onto the floor. The green and yellow panes of the glass gardens were all in shards, the trees and fruits and flowers torn up or left exposed to die. Of the stables, made of wood and thatch, nothing remained but ashes, embers, and dead horses. There was a shallow steaming lake beneath the library tower, and hot water gushing from a crack in its side. The bridge between the bell tower and the rookery had collapsed into the yard below, and Mayor Stillowin's turret was gone. He saw a dull red glow shining up through the narrow cellar windows beneath the great keep, and a second fire still burning in one of the storehouses. It did not at all feel right to Brindon to see his home in this state. He saw the ruins of Mitken's forge and his mother's September his father had built for her. He had not at all been a follower of the faith, instead keeping faith with the old gods, his father's gods. It sickened Brindon as he saw all the damage that had been done to his home. The damage could be repaired, but it would not at all feel like the Winterfell he had lived in for all his life, playing with his siblings and practicing his swordplay in the courtyard. Theon will pay for this, Brindon vowed. Brindon saw one dog worrying at a corpse, but he ran away when he caught the scent of Shadow. The rest had been slain in the kennels. The Maestas ravens were paying court to some of the corpses, while the crows from the broken tower attended others. One charred corpse, outside the ashen shell of Mother's September, sat with his arms drawn up and his hands balled into hard black fists, as if to punch anyone who dared approach him. So much death and destruction. Was there no one here that survived? Not for the first time he cursed the distance between Winterfell and Deepwood Motte. Had they arrived here sooner, all of this could have been prevented. Making his way through the ruin and death, Brindon came across the first keep, or what remained of it. One whole side of the building had torn loose and fallen away. Stone and shattered gargoyles lay strewn across the yard. Nearby some crows were pecking at a body crushed beneath the tumbled stone, but he lay face down and Brindon could not say who he was. The first keep had not been used for many hundreds of years, but now it was more of a shell than ever. The floors had burned inside it, and all the beams. Where the wall had fallen away, he could see right into the rooms, even into the privy. Yet behind, the broken tower still stood, no more burned than before. Suddenly he heard a dull rumble and Brindon spun around and saw that it was coming from the door to the crypts. Survivors, Brindon thought as he made his way over with Shadow bounding after him. Still, he did not know if they were friend or foe on the other side and unsheathed ice as he warily approached the ironwood door. He just hoped that those inside were friends and would know what had happened here. Another shove from the other side shifted the stones and the door was swung open. To his shock and surprise, Brindon found himself facing his brothers, Bran and Rickon. "I'm dreaming," Brindon thought as ice slipped out of his hands and fell onto the ground. "You're supposed to be dead," he whispered. "Brindon." Bran and Rickon cried out in joy as they rushed over to him and threw themselves onto him, knocking him onto the ground. He still could not believe they were alive as he returned their hugs, not wanting to let them go. "I thought Theon killed you too," Brindon told them, relieved they were real. "He never found us," Bran explained. "We hid in Father's tomb after I sent the wolves on to make a trail." Bran smiled as Brindon freed him and Rickon from his embrace. "I thought I'd never see you again. Is Mother and Robb here?" Rickon asked, looking at Brindon. He shook his head. "They are still in the south as far as I know. I've been busy ridding the north of the Ironborn." Brindon smiled and ruffled Rickon's hair. "I'm sorry I couldn't get here sooner." Brindon looked up at their companions, Hodder, Osher the Wilderling, and boy and a girl he did not recognize. "Who are your companions?" He nodded at the boy and girl. "They are Howland Reed's children," Moira and Hojan, Bran introduced. "They came to swear fealty to Robb in their father's place during the harvest feast." "Thank you for looking after my brothers," Brindon said, and broke off suddenly at a noise behind them. Two lean dark shapes emerged from behind the broken tower, padding slowly through the rubble. Rickon gave a happy shout of Shaggy, and the black direwolf came bounding toward him. Summer advanced more slowly, rubbed his head up against Bran's arm, and licked his face. Shadow greeted his littermates and nipped their ears. "Who else is here?" Bran asked while scratching Summer's ear. "Most of the men I marched south with on the Green Fork and men from the mountain clans," Brindon replied. "I sought out their aid and united them under my banner before marching on to Winterfell. A quarrelsome folk they were, and Brindon had ate their bread and salt, drunk their ale, listened to their pipers, praised the beauty of their daughters and courage of their sons, until they all had sworn their swords to his army. 11,000 men Brynden now had, and it all had been for nothing. He should have marched on to Winterfell instead of wasting his time with the mountain clans. "Do you know what happened here?" Brynden asked. "Last I heard from Moat Cailin was that Sir Roderick was laying siege to Winterfell with 2,000 men. How could Theon and his 50 men do all of this?" "We don't know exactly what happened, but I saw Winterfell burning in my dream." Bran told him, much to Brynden's confusion. How could his brother have seen what was going on in his dreams? How could you have dreamt of it? Before Bran could reply, Summer howled, and darted away. The gods would. Meera Reed ran after the direwolf, her shield and frog spear to hand. "Come, let's see what your wolf has picked up," Brynden said as he picked ice up off the ground, and the rest of them trailed after Meera and Summer, threading their way through smoke and fallen stones. The air was sweeter under the trees. A few pines along the edge of the wood had been scorched, but deeper in the damp soil and green wood had defeated the flames. On the edge of the black pool, beneath the shelter of the heart tree, Maester Lewin lay on his belly in the dirt. A trail of blood twisted back through damp leaves where he had crawled. Summer stood over him, and Brynden thought he was dead at first, but when Meera touched his throat, the Maester moaned. "Hodder! Hodder," said mournfully. "Hodder!" Gently, they eased Lewin onto his back. He had grey eyes and grey hair, and once his robes had been grey as well, but they were darker now where the blood had soaked through. "Brynden," he said softly with a surprised tone, and he smiled when he saw Bran and Rickon. "And Bran and Rickon too. The gods are good." "What happened here?" Brynden asked. "The bastard of Bolton did this," Lewin replied, a froth of blood on his lips. When the Maester tried to move, he gave a sharp gasp of pain. "Hold on, I'll get you some help," Brynden pleaded, tears filling his eyes. If the Maester had survived for this long, Brynden was certain he would be able to find a Maester in his army to help him. He had seen men die before in battle, but none that were close to him like Maester Lewin, who had been there all his life. "No use," said Lewin. "I'm dying." "You can't," said Rickon angrily. "No you can't." Beside him, Shaggydock bared his teeth and growled. The Maester smiled. "Hush now, child, I'm much older than you. I can die as I please." "How could the bastard of Bolton do all of this?" "Sir Roderick had 2,000 men," Brynden asked. "He would make the bastard pay for what he had done to his home." "He surprised Sir Roderick's host with 600 men," Lewin replied. "Sir Winboy's dead. Sir Roderick, Leopold Tallheart, Lady Hornwood all slain. I will have him answer for what he has done here," Brynden assured Lewin. "I will not rest until his head is on a spike." He would have the bastard of Bolton suffer the same fate as the Ironborn. Sir Roderick killed, Maester Lewin, and everyone he knew was gone because of the bastard. He will avenge them. Not even the Dreadfort would be able to protect the bastard from his wrath. The Maester smiled. "I leave Winterfell in your hands now. Protect your brothers, and remember, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell." "I will," Brynden vowed, balling his hand into a fist. How many more people was he going to lose before this war ended? "Don't leave us," Bran begged. Maester Lewin reached up and grasped Bran's forearm, his fingers closing with a desperate strength. "You must be strong now." "Strong. I will be," Bran promised. "Good," the Maester said. "Now, leave me with your brother. I wish to speak with him alone." "Go," Brynden ordered his brothers and the others. Hojan and Meera led Bran and Rickon out. Osha and Hodder followed. When they were gone, Brynden turned his attention back to Maester Lewin. "I can still get you a Maester." "No need." The Maester swallowed. "You know why I asked for you?" Brynden said, with a solemn tone. He had seen his men give the gift of mercy sometimes on the battlefield to soldiers who were past saving. Maester Lewin was right. Brynden was fooling himself if he believed the Maester would live if he brought help. "I will not forget your teachings," Brynden told him as he drew his Valyrian steel dagger out from his belt. "Your father would be proud of you," Lewin said. "Not if he knew what he had done to his enemies and to Asher. And of your brothers." Brynden closed his eyes, wishing he didn't have to do this, then opened them and gazed up at the weirwood, at the red face carved in the pale trunk. "Rest now, Maester," he whispered as he eased his dagger into the man's chest and watched as the life went out of the Maester's eyes. As he slid the blade back out and wiped it on the Maester's robes, he closed Lewin's eyes. Placing the dagger against the moss-covered stone, Brynden unsheathed ice and sat underneath the weirwood. He closed his eyes and rested his hand over his eyes. Sir Roderick, Lewin, and everyone he knew was gone, but his brothers. Winterfell and his brothers were now his responsibility so long as Robb was still in the south fighting against the Lannisters. If he hoped to protect them and the north, Brynden would have to be as hard as the land he protected, like the first kings in the north. Edmure, Tully, Riverrun. The small folk cheered as her brother rode through the portcullis. The leaping trout of Riverrun waved on a standard. A knot of men stood before the portcullis with Catelyn as it rose in jerks and starts, and in the fields beyond, outside the castle, were several hundred riders. Despite her brother's return, Catelyn did not share their joy. It was still hard for her to believe that Bran and Rickon were gone, their heads mounted on the walls of Winterfell. Now she had only 2 sons and her daughters were still captives at King's Landing. She prayed that Brynden showed no mercy to Theon when he took back Winterfell from the Ironborn. If what the tales she had heard of her son were true, Brynden would have Theon's head on a spike before he told Robb he had reclaimed Winterfell. The Black Wolf and the Demon of the North, the men and the small folk called her son. Catelyn wondered how much Brynden had changed since she had last seen him at the Twins. War changes people, Catelyn remembered Ned telling her. They did not always come back the same as they were before. Unlike with Robb, Catelyn was not there for Brynden to comfort him in his grief when they had received news of Ned's death. Her family had lost so much in this war and she wondered if her daughters would follow Bran and Rickon into the grave. Only the Kingslayer would be able to buy her daughters' lives and freedom, but he was held by Brynden in the north, leagues from Riverrun. Neither of her sons would trade the Kingslayer to the Lannisters for the girls. Even if she wrote to Brynden, pleading him to trade the Kingslayer, Catelyn knew it would all be for naught. Dried red mud spattered Edmure's boots, greaves, and surcoat, as he dismounted from his horse. To look at him, you would never know he had won his battle. He was thin and drawn, with pale cheeks, unkempt beard, and 2 bright eyes. "Edmure," Catelyn said, worried, "you look unwell. Has something happened? Have the Lannisters crossed the river?" "I threw them back. Lord Tywine, Gregor Clegane, Adam Marbrand, I turned them away. Stannis, though." He grimaced. "Stannis? What of Stannis?" "He lost the battle at King's Landing," Edmure said unhappily. "His fleet was burned, his army routed." A Lannister victory was ill tidings, but Catelyn could not share her brother's obvious dismay. She still had nightmares about the shadow she had seen slide across Renly's tent and the way the blood had come flowing out through the steel of his gorget. Stannis was no more a friend than Lord Tywine. "You do not understand. Highgarden has declared for Joffrey. Dorne as well. All the south. Have you heard from Robb or your Brynden? Brynden marches on to Winterfell from Deepwood Motte to join his forces with Sir Roderick's from Sewin. Robb was wounded while storming the crag. We have had no word since from either of them. It shouldn't have taken this long for Brynden to retake Winterfell from the Ironborn. It was not like her son to be silent for this long. A raven would always arrive from the north a few days after he had fought a battle." Catelyn knew it was a long march between Winterfell and Deepwood Motte, but she hated the wait. Brynden and Robb were the only sons she had left. She did not know what she would do if she lost either of them as well. "They will be fine," Cat Edmure assured her, sensing her distress. "Robb has not lost a battle yet, and Brynden has been ridding the north of the Ironborn. It is the Lannisters we should be worrying about now that they have allied with the Reach and Dorne." "We still have the Kingslayer," Catelyn told him. "Aye, but it will not be long before they decide to attack. With the ships of the Iron Fleet your Brynden captured on the Fever River, Robb may turn his attention on to Lannisport or King's Landing. Your Brynden should have left the task of retaking Winterfell to Sir Roderick and taken the ships of the Iron Fleet to join Robb's forces in the west. My son did what he thought what was the best for the north. So long as Winterfell remains in the hands of the Ironborn, Robb will be seen as weak by our enemies." Catelyn snapped. She wished Brynden had left the task to Sir Roderick as well, but her son had made up his mind when he had marched from Deepwood Motte after retaking the castle from the Ironborn. Besides, Brynden does not have any skilled sailors in his army to sail his ships into battle. Brynden had explained as much to her in the letter he had written to her. "How fares our father?" Edmure asked, changing the subject. "His condition worsens. Did you know that Lysa was pregnant before she had married Jon Arryn?" Catelyn still couldn't believe her father had forced Lysa to give up the child she was carrying. It all made sense now why Jon Arryn had taken Lysa as his wife, one who was known to be fertile if House Arryn was to continue. "No, I did not," Edmure replied, surprised by her question. "Why do you ask? Did father tell you this?" "No, I figured it out after father kept mentioning Tansy, the blood, and true-born children," Catelyn replied. "It all makes sense why Jon Arryn had taken Lysa as his wife. Gods, is that why Lysa does not respond to our pleas for help? Our father is dying and she does nothing to help us against our enemies. The others take her." Edmure cursed. "I sent a raven to her, pleading her to come to Riverrun to make amends with father, but Maester Vimen believes the raven will arrive too late. Will you come with me to see father?" Later, after the feast, Edmure told her, walking away to join his men. Catelyn soon returned to her father's solar, praying that Robb and Brynden were safe. With the Lannisters allied with the Tyrells and Martells, her sons now had all of the south to deal with as enemies. Her daughters held in King's Landing, her only living sons at war. Catelyn wondered if she would ever see her family united again. The Masons were hard at work repairing the damage that had been done to Winterfell. It would be some time before they would be able to send a message to Riverrun, informing Bran's mother he and Rickon were alive. In the meantime, Bran's brother Brynden had taken over as the Prince of Winterfell, putting men to work to repair the walls while waiting for Maesters to arrive from nearby castles to take charge of Lewin's ravens, so messages might be sent and received from here again. Since their reunion, Brynden had not let Bran and Rickon out of his sight, putting his own guards to watch them while he was in meetings and drilling his men. While Bran hated having guards watching him, he understood why his brother had done it. Brynden did not want to lose his brothers again, having just been reunited with Bran and Rickon after he had believed they were dead. Shadow had also trailed Bran wherever he went, and he had no doubt. Brynden had ordered his wolf to watch them as well. Bran wondered how Mother and Robb would react when they learned they were alive and well. It was only a matter of time before Brynden marched on to the Dread Fort to have the Bastard of Bolton answer for his crimes. When he did, Bran would be left at Winterfell alone with Rickon, again. He wanted to go with Brynden, but his brother would hear none of it. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell, Brynden told him. It was just an excuse to keep him from joining his brother in battle. Bran was glad that Hojan and Meera had decided to remain at Winterfell, despite Hojan's urgings he should seek a teacher to teach him how to fly. Why did he need to learn how to fly when he could walk? His brother was home again and he was safe at Winterfell with an army of 11,000 men guarding the castle. Bran had heard what Brynden had done to the Ironborn that invaded the north, but didn't mind as much as he should have. The Demon of the North and the Black Wolf his brother was called, and Brynden would entertain Bran and Rickon of his battles on the Fever River and Deepwood Motte. His brother was born to be a warrior and Bran hoped to be like him someday. He doubted he would be as renowned as his brothers Brynden and Robb were though. Making his way to the stables, Bran saw Hodder helping out with the other stable boys. The Bastard of Bolton had burned the stables when he sacked Winterfell, so his brother had thrown up new ones twice as large as the old, to accommodate the war horses and palfreys of his lords bannermen and knights. The stables were not Bran's destination though as he continued onward to where he wanted to be. Bran knew he would find Brynden in the crypts of Winterfell. It was one of the first places his brother had repaired. The entrance to the crypts was in the oldest section of the castle, near the foot of the first keep, which had sat unused for hundreds of years. The Bastard of Bolton had put it to the torch when he sacked Winterfell, and much of what had not burned had collapsed. Only a shell remained, but the rubble from the sack had been cleared away. This was where Bran had fallen and Brynden had caught him. It was Shadow and Summer who had led him to Bran, Brynden had told him after he had woken up. The winding stone steps were narrow. His guards, Summer, and Shadow followed behind him in single file. He had never feared the crypts, they were part of his home and who he was, and he had always known that one day he would lie here too. The ironwood door was already open and Bran led his guards out into a long vaulted tunnel, where mighty granite pillars marched 2 by 2 into blackness. These were the old kings in the north, on their brows they wore stone crowns, and their faces were stern and strong. Their footsteps echoed through the vault as they made their way between the rows of pillars. The stone eyes and the eyes of their stone direwolves followed them. Only a little further did Bran spot another glowing light as they halted before 4 tombs closely grouped together. He felt shadow brush past him as he joined Brynden at their father's tomb. "What are you doing here, Bran?" Brynden asked as he scratched Shadow's ear. "Don't tell me I have another meeting to attend to." I told them I did not wish to be disturbed. "There are no meetings," Bran told him. "I just wanted to come down and see father." He joined his brother and looked up at the long-faced, bearded, and solemn face of their father. Horlis Mollin, the captain of the guards, had arrived with an escort and a group of silent sisters a few days earlier from Moat Cailin to deliver their father's bones. Brynden had immediately sent for a mason to carve their father's statue before they buried him in the crypt. Ever since then, while he wasn't busy or watching Bran and Rickon, Brynden would go down to the crypts to see their father. "I still cannot believe he is gone," Brynden muttered. "Father never should have gone south with the king. None of us could have known what would happen," Bran told him. "He still never should have gone," Brynden sighed. "Everything that has happened so far to our family is because our father had gone south. Who could have imagined Robb would be a king and we would be princes?" "I never would have," Bran said. "As much as I hate to leave you and Rickon here, I must march on the Dread Fort soon. Once the bastard of Bolton has been dealt with, the north will be safe again. Why can't you send someone else?" Bran didn't want his brother to go, not after they had just been reunited, and he knew Rickon would not be pleased to hear their brother was leaving again. "Because I am a Stark," Brynden replied. "It will not be for long, I promise you. When I am done with the bastard, I will return and remain at Winterfell until we can send ravens again. Robb will want the ships I captured from the Iron Fleet and Lord Marndaly will send captains and sailors to command them. Hopefully Mother will come back soon and look after you while I join Robb in the south." "I still don't want you to leave," Bran said. "Neither do I, but I must." "What about the Kingslayer and the Cricken's daughter?" Bran asked. He had heard the Kingslayer was here and Bran had felt a sense of fear when he had learned about it, though he could not understand why. "The Kingslayer will remain in the dungeons but Asher will accompany me to the Dread Fort." "When will you leave?" "When the repairs to the walls and battlements are finished. I will not make the same mistake Sir Roderick made. 2,000 men will remain behind while I march on the Dread Fort. You need not worry about being captured again, Bran. You're safe now. Just don't take too long." "I won't, I promise." Chapter 10, Prince of Winterfell. Here we are with the first chapter of the 3rd book, and oh man, I enjoyed seeing your guys' reactions to Brynden having some fun with Asher. I found it funny. That was the only thing that stood out in the last chapter, especially when it was mostly the guests that were shocked about it, but shout out to that one guest who pointed out this was no My Little Pony universe. Anyway, shout outs to new reviewers, L.A. Rain, Dipsy, Culhu 314159227, Charles Caesar, Lilo23, and to returning reviewers, Vandal, Scon, Warsage, Master of Dragons God, War Bible, Blaze 1992, and guests. Enjoy and review. It had been a few days before Maestas had arrived at Winterfell to attend to the ravens. 3 of them had entered together by the Lord's door behind the dais, one tall, one plump, one very young, but in their robes and chains they were 3 grey peas from a black pot. Before the war, Medric had served Lord Hornwood, Rodri Lord Sewin, and young Henley Lord Slate. Bran's brother Brynden had summoned them all to Winterfell to take charge of Lewin's ravens, so messages might be sent and received from here again. Not for the first time, Bran wished that Maester Lewin was still alive, but he was dead along with Sir Roderick, and Brynden had their bodies laid to rest in the Lycoyard, where the servants of House Stark were buried. Bran had been present when Brynden had sealed his letter with his own personal seal, a black direwolf, before sending it off to Riverrun, where their mother and Robb would be, informing them of Bran and Rickon's survival and that Winterfell had been retaken, along with Brynden's intentions to march on to the Dread Fort to have the bastard of Bolton answer for his crimes. With his brother back, Bran no longer had to assume the Lord's duties, but when Brynden marched on to the Dread Fort, Bran would have to resume his rule over the castle as the Stark in Winterfell. The walls and battlements had been mostly repaired since Horlis Mollin had arrived with Father's bones, and they had begun to work on the damages done to the interior. Stout new gates had gone up to replace those that had been burned, and the collapsed roof of the Great Hall had been cleared away and a new one raised in its stead. Bran's brother had made certain during the repairs that Winterfell looked as it did before it had been sacked. Many of Bryndon's commanders had insisted they march on the Dread Fort at once, but Bryndon told them he would not march until his brothers were safe. Winterfell just no longer felt the same as Bran remembered it. This place was scarred and broken, more ruin than redoubt, a haunt of crows and corpses. The great double curtain wall still stood, for granite does not yield easily to fire, but most of the towers and keeps within were roofless. A few had collapsed. The thatch and timber had been consumed by fire, in whole or in part, and under the shattered panes of the glass garden the fruits and vegetables that would have fed the castle were dead and black and frozen. The only part of the castle that had not been damaged during the sack was the Godswood. With all the men that had followed Bryndon since the Green Fork occupying Winterfell, Bran was reminded of the time when Robb had summoned the bannermen to Winterfell. The winter houses in the winter town had mostly been repaired and now housed most of Bryndon's men. With Sir Roderick's death and the slaughter of Winterfell's garrison, Bryndon had assigned 1,000 veterans of the Green Fork, Fever River, and Deepwood Motte as the new garrison of Winterfell, while naming Horlis Mollin Castellan of Winterfell as well as captain of the guards. Despite his brother's promises that he would not let him and Rickon out of his sight and would find the time to be with them, Bran had noticed that Bryndon had become more and more occupied with his war councils as he prepared to march on to the Dread Fort. Bran hoped his brother did not plan to lay siege to the castle. The last time a Stark had laid siege to the Dread Fort had been when the Boltons had rose up in rebellion against King Harlon Stark, and King Harlon had laid siege to the castle for 2 years before they had surrendered. He doubted his brother had the time or patience to wait that long while Robb was still fighting in the south. Bryndon seemed half a stranger to Bran now, transformed like Robb, a battle commander in truth, and 16, a man grown. It was still hard for Bran to believe it had been a year since he had last seen his brother before he had marched south with Robb. War had melted all the softness from his face and left him hard and lean. He had also grown a beard, but kept his dark brown hair cut short, and his cold grey eyes reminded Bran of father and Jon Snow. Entering the courtyard with Summer trailing behind him, Bran spotted Bryndon as he drilled the new guards while Shadow watched from a distance. Slung on his brother's back was ice, and Bran smiled as Bryndon walked over to greet him. Shadow and Summer greeted each other with a nip to the ear as Bryndon ruffled his hair. "Ready for some sparring?" Bryndon asked. "Always," Bran replied as Bryndon handed ice to one of his guards before taking a wooden sword. They had spent most of the day sparring, with Bryndon taking over the lessons Sir Roderick would have taught Bran if he were still alive. "Keep your shield up," Bryndon told Bran as he blocked one of his brother's blows. It was moments like these that Bran wished his brother didn't have to go back to war, but he knew Winterfell and the North would not be safe so long as the bastard of Bolton was still at large. When they were done sparring, Bryndon walked with Bran to his chambers while their wolves followed them. "When do you think Mother will be able to come back?" Bran asked. "Soon," Bryndon replied. "When I am done with the bastard, I plan to march back to Deepwood Motte and take the ships of the Iron Fleet to Seaguard and join Mother and Robb in the Riverlands. Hopefully Robb will let Mother return north now that the Ironborn are dealt with. Winterfell will be safe once I am done with the bastard of Bolton, and the Ironborn are no longer a threat with their ships now under our control." "What about Sansa and Arya?" Bran missed his sisters, and he knew that Bryndon did as well. "I don't know," Bryndon replied. "All that I know is that we have to win this war if we hope to see them again." Was this how a salt wife felt when she was taken against her will in bed with a man who was her captor? Asha didn't know whether to be grateful or not that she was still alive. What would her father think of her when he learned that she was spreading her legs for a Greenlander, not to mention a Stark? Bryndon Stark was not at all a bad lover, but it didn't feel the same as when she was with Carl the Maid or any of her other lovers. It didn't help that her captor planned to raise the Iron Islands in retribution for their attempted invasion of the North. Not for the first time, Asha cursed Theon for his foolishness. Had he just stuck with their father's plan, the Ironborn might still have a hold on the North. She had heard of the victories the Demon of the North had won against her people, the Fever River and the Stony Shore. Her uncle's forces had all been put to the sword and Dagmar's force was smashed. Even her own ship, the Black Wind, was now in the hands of the wolves when they had retaken Deepwood Motte from her men. Asher doubted Brynden Stark would ever consent to marry her, to save her people from his wrath. Her father's rebellion had failed twice and this one would cost them the lives of all of their people. No doubt Brynden would keep her as his mistress when he was done with the Iron Islands. She knew she was only still alive because of her relation to Theon. It would not surprise her if Brynden's plan were to impregnate her, given how many times he had already spilled his seed into her womb. Asher cursed her body for enjoying it whenever he was inside of her, as her loins would always ache when they were done. Ever since he had learned that his brothers were alive, however, Brynden had been a lot more gentle with her once he had learned that her brother was not responsible for sacking Winterfell. He still had not forgiven Theon though for betraying them. Asher wondered where her brother could be, as they had not found his body amongst the dead. Brynden believed that her brother could have taken by the bastard of Bolton back to the Dread Fort, as they had found the bodies of Ironborn in the courtyard, except for Theon's. Your brother lied about your beauty, my lady. Asher turned her gaze to the door as Brynden entered with his wolf. She had learned by now not to threaten Brynden, as his wolf seemed to sense when his master was in danger. My brother has not seen me for over 10 years, Asher told him as he took off his doublet and began to unlace his breeches. The pimples went when the breasts came. She remembered telling her brother the same thing when he had not recognized her. It had been very amusing for her to see her brother look at her as some woman he could bed and not as his sister. He certainly was very handsome, Asher thought as she took in his appearance. He was broad of shoulder, with arms thick with muscle, and his hands were calloused. Despite the situation she was in, Asher enjoyed the feeling of his hands when Brynden squeezed her breasts while he fucked her. She wondered how he was going to take her this time, as Asher preferred to be on top, even though Brynden enjoyed being on top and taking her from behind. Asher had come to accept her fate and had decided not to resist when Brynden wanted to fuck her. And now you are mine, Brynden claimed as he climbed into bed with her and pressed his lips against hers. She could feel how hard his shaft was as it pressed against her body while he began to help her take off her clothes. She stroked his cock as her breasts spilled out and were pressed against his chest. His rough hands squeezed her breasts and she was lost in the pleasure as she forgot all of her worries and thought only of the hard manhood she was stroking that would soon be inside of her. She smiled when Brynden flipped onto his back, his cock hard as a mast. Whatever happened to you fucking me? She asked as she mounted him, drawing him so deep inside her that she could not tell who had the cock and who the cunt. I thought I'd let you take the lead tonight, Brynden grinned as his hands squeezed her breasts, causing her to moan in pleasure as she began to ride him. God's woman, Brynden groaned as Asher swayed back and forth against his shaft, feeling his cock dig against her insides. Where have you been all my life? Shut up and let me fuck you, Asher hushed as she bent down while she continued to ride him and pressed her lips against his, their tongues tugging on one another, fighting for dominance. Her nipples brushed against his chest as Brynden let go of her breasts and reached around her to squeeze her rear end. She wrapped her arms around his neck and cried out as she climaxed. Asher moaned when she felt Brynden's manhood slowly slide in and out of her. Damn you, Asher cursed, moaning in pleasure. Now is that any way to speak to your captor? Brynden japed, sliding his shaft out of her and flipping Asher onto her side, pressing his chest against her back as he slid his thick manhood back inside her. He began to thrust harder into her, sucking on her neck while he reached over and squeezed one of her breasts along with pinching her nipple. Just like that, Asher cried out, feeling Brynden go deeper inside of her as his cock tugged against her walls. She could feel another release coming and could tell that Brynden was also ready as his manhood began to throb inside her. This time they climaxed together and Brynden spilled his seed into her womb. I don't think that I will ever grow tired of fucking you, Brynden whispered into her ear while fondling her breast. For a while they stayed like that in bed, with his cock still inside of her until he pulled out, his seed trickling down her thigh. Brynden lay on his back as Asher crawled on top of him and took him in her mouth. He began to stiffen as the head pressed against the back of her throat, with only half of his manhood inside her. Asher gagged as he climaxed, filling her mouth with his seed and she gulped it all down. By the time she was done, she was wet again and Brynden was hard from watching her. Asher smiled as Brynden flipped her onto her back and climbed on top of her. Not bad for a Greenlander. Keep this up and I doubt we'll ever get any sleep, Brynden smirked before sliding his manhood inside of her. Asha moaned and wrapped her arms and legs around his body as he began to fuck her harder than before. He fucked her until she cried out in pleasure, and then again until she screamed, before spilling his seed into her womb once more. Asha cursed how quickly Brynden had learned what made her tick, what pleasured her and what didn't. By the time they were done, Brynden had spilled his seed into her womb 2 more times that night. Lord Tywyn's chain of hands made a golden glitter against the deep wine velvet of his tunic. The Lords Tyrell, Redwyne, and Rowan gathered round him as he entered. He greeted each in turn, spoke a quiet word to Varys, kissed the High Septon's ring and Cersea's cheek, clasped the hand of Grand Maester Pycelle, and seated himself in the king's place at the head of the long table, between his daughter and his brother. Tyrion had claimed Pycelle's old place at the foot, propped up by cushions so he could gaze down the length of the table. Dispossessed, Pycelle had moved up next to Cersei, about as far from the dwarf as he could get without claiming the king's seat. The Grand Maester was a shambling skeleton, leaning heavily on a twisted cane and shaking as he walked, a few white hairs sprouting from his long chicken's neck in place of his once luxuriant white beard. Tyrion gazed at him without remorse. The others had to scramble for seats. Lord Mace Tyrell, a heavy, robust man with curling brown hair and a spade-shaped beard well salted with white. Paxter Redwyne of the Arbor, stoop-shouldered and thin, his bald head fringed by tufts of orange hair. Mathis Rowan, Lord of Golden Grove, clean-shaven, stout, and sweating. The High Septon, a frail man with wispy white chin hair. Too many strange faces, Tyrion thought, too many new players. The game changed while I lay rotting in my bed, and no one will tell me the rules. Shall we begin with the wedding arrangements? Cersei asked as Lord Tywyn took his seat. No, their father said. With the war. Varys. The eunuch gave them a solemn look. Alas, I bring ill news for you, my lords. Robb Stark's brothers live and his brother Brynden Stark, the Demon of the North, has put all of the Ironborn in the north to the sword, captured Balon Greyjoy's daughter along with the ships of the Iron Fleet and has retaken Winterfell. Sir Jaime remains a prisoner of the Starks, locked in the dungeons of Winterfell, and Brynden Stark plans to march on to the Dread Fort to take the head of the Bastard of Bolton for sacking Winterfell. Tyrion along with the other lords were surprised to hear Bran and Rickon still lived. He remembered not long ago when he had been informed that Theon Greyjoy decorated the walls of Winterfell with the corpses of the Stark boys. Lord Tyrell voiced Tyrion's thoughts. How do the Stark boys still live? Theon Greyjoy had their heads mounted on the castle walls. It turns out that those boys Theon Greyjoy presented were Emilla's boys. How do we know that the Stark boys Brynden Stark has presented live when they could be imposters? Littlefinger asked. Their wolves are by their sides and I doubt Brynden Stark would lie about his brothers. The eunuch replied. What do we know of Stark's plans and movements? Asked Mathis Rowan, ever blunt and to the point. He has run back to Riverrun with his plunder, abandoning the castles he took in the west, announced Lord Tywyn. Our cousin Sir Davin is reforming the remnants of his late father's army at Lannisport. When they are ready he shall join Sir Forley Prester at the Golden Tooth. As soon as the Stark boy starts north, Sir Forley and Sir Davin will descend on Riverrun. You are certain Lord Stark means to go north? Lord Rowan asked. Mace Tyrell spoke up. No doubt the boy plans to join his forces to Roose Bolton's once more and wait for his brother to sail down from the north to further augment his own strength before launching his assault on the Iron Islands. That is what I would do. Tyrion had to bite his tongue at that. Robb and Brynden Stark had won more battles in a year than the Lord of Highgarden had in 20. Tyrell's reputation rested on one indecisive victory over Robert Baratheon at Ashford, in a battle largely won by Lord Tarlis Van before the main host had even arrived. The siege of Storm's End, where Mace Tyrell actually did hold the command, had dragged on a year to no result, and after the Trident was fought, the Lord of Highgarden had meekly dipped his banners to Eddard Stark. I ought to write Robb Stark a stern letter, Littlefinger was saying. I understand his man Bolton is stabling goats in my high hall, it's really quite unconscionable. Sir Kevan Lannister cleared his throat. As regards the Starks, Balon Greyjoy, who now styles himself King of the Isles, has written to us offering terms of alliance to deal with the Starks. He ought to be offering fealty, snapped Cersei. He no longer even has power at sea anymore. Losing his own fleet to a mere boy. What terms does he propose? Lord Mathis Rowan asked. That we recognize his kingship and grant him everything north of the neck." Lord Redwyne laughed. "How does he hope to control all of that when he doesn't even have the strength to defeat the Starks in battle? I say let the Starks and the Greyjoys fight each other while we finish Stannis." Mace Tyrell added. Lord Tywin's face gave no hint as to his feelings. "There is Lysa Arryn to deal with as well. Jon Arryn's widow, Hoster Tully's daughter, Catelyn Stark's sister whose husband was conspiring with Stannis Baratheon at the time of his death." "Oh," said Mace Tyrell cheerfully, "women have no stomach for war. Let her be, I say, she's not like to trouble us." "I agree," said Redwyne. "The Lady Lysa took no part in the fighting, nor has she committed any overt acts of treason." Tyrion stirred. "She did throw me in a cell and put me on trial for my life," he pointed out, "with a certain amount of rancor. Nor has she returned to King's Landing to swear fealty to Joff, as she was commanded. My lords, grant me the men, and I will sort out Lysa Arryn. He could think of nothing he would enjoy more, except perhaps strangling Cersei. Sometimes he still dreamed of the Aerys sky cells, and woke drenched in cold sweat." Mace Tyrell's smile was jovial, but behind it Tyrion sensed contempt. "Perhaps you'd best leave the fighting to fighters," said the Lord of Highgarden. "Better men than you have lost great armies in the mountains of the moon, or shattered them against the bloody gate. We know your worth, my lord, no need to tempt fate." Tyrion pushed off his cushions, bristling, but his father spoke before he could lash back. "I have other tasks in mind for Tyrion. I believe Lord Petter may hold the key to the Eyrie." "Oh, I do," said Littlefinger, "I have it here between my legs." There was mischief in his grey-green eyes. "My lords, with your leave, I propose to travel to the Vale and there woo and win Lady Lysa Arryn. Once I am her consort, I shall deliver you the Vale of Arryn without a drop of blood being spilled." Lord Rowan looked doubtful. "Would Lady Lysa have you?" "She's had me a few times before, Lord Mathis, and voiced no complaints." "Bedding," said Cersei, "is not wedding. Even a cow like Lysa Arryn might be able to grasp the difference." "To be sure. It would not have been fitting for a daughter of Riverrun to marry one so far below her." Littlefinger spread his hands. "Now, though a match between the Lady of the Eyrie and the Lord of Harrenhal is not so unthinkable, is it?" Tyrion noted the look that passed between Paxter Redwyne and Mace Tyrell. "It might serve," Lord Rowan said, "if you are certain that you can keep the women loyal to the King's grace." "My lords," pronounced the High Septon, "autumn is upon us, and all men of good heart are weary of war. If Lord Baelish can bring the Vale back into the King's peace without more shedding of blood, the gods will surely bless him." "But can he?" asked Lord Redwyne. "Jon Arryn's son is Lord of the Eyrie now." "The Lord Robert." "Only a boy," said Littlefinger. "I will see that he grows to be Joffrey's most loyal subject, and a fast friend to us all." Tyrion studied the slender man with the pointed beard and irreverent grey-green eyes. "Lord of Harrenhal, an empty honor." "Bugger that, father. Even if he never sets foot in the castle, the title makes this match possible, as he's known all along." "We have no lack of foes," said Sir Kevan Lannister. "If the Eyrie can be kept out of the war, all to the good. I am of a mind to see what Lord Petter can accomplish." Sir Kevan was his brother's vanguard in council. Tyrion knew from long experience, he never had a thought that Lord Tywine had not had first. "It has all been settled beforehand," he concluded, "and this discussion's no more than a show." "Perhaps we ought move on to the wedding," Sir Kevan added. "My lord father has sent captains and sailors to crew the ships to Deepwood Motte," Sir Willis Marndale announced. Good Brynden nodded. "We'll need them for when we set sail for Seaguard when we are done with the bastard." It had been a couple of days before Raven had returned from Riverrun. Brynden was not at all surprised that it was his mother who had written back to him. His mother needed some good news, and Brynden was relieved to inform Mother that Bran and Rickon still lived instead of having to tell her that their bodies were being laid to rest. He did not at all know how she would have taken the news. Brynden had been none too pleased, however, when Mother had told him their alliance with the Freys had been broken because Robb had wed some western wench. How could Robb be such a fool? They needed a united kingdom if they hoped to stand a chance against the Lannisters and the Tyrell alliance. The Riverlands would be impossible to hold against the Southron alliance if the Freys decided to turn cloaks. At least Brynden had the sense not to take Asha Greyjoy as his wife once he had bedded her. Brynden knew it had to have been honor that compelled Robb to marry the wench. Honor got their father killed, and now Robb's honor had cost them an alliance with the Freys. While Brynden was looking forward to seeing Robb and Mother again, he was not at all looking forward to the dangers they would face once he joined them in the south. At least when they were in the north they had the advantage, but in the Riverlands they were surrounded by enemies on all sides. It didn't help that Aunt Lysa refused to send the Knights of the Vale to aid them. If she had lent the Vale's strength to their cause, they might have stood a chance with holding the Riverlands against all of the south. Now Brynden didn't like the odds they were facing, with the Tyrells and the Martells allied with the Lannisters and Stannis Baratheon broken at the Blackwater. Not to mention that Sansa and Arya were still held as prisoners in King's Landing. The only thing keeping them at bay was that the Kingslayer was still their prisoner, and they now had control over the Sunset Sea. But thanks to Robb's folly, they now had also angered the Freys of the Crossing. Not for the first time, Brynden wondered if the Riverlands was worth all the trouble they were in. If they abandoned the Riverlands though, they would be leaving the Riverlords at the mercy of the Lannisters. Brynden doubted they would be willing to abandon their castles and flee to the north. Why did you have to go and break your word, Robb? They needed swords now more than ever, and Robb had lost the Freys because of some western wench. Robb should have seen the sense in his folly when he had decided to marry her, but Brynden couldn't blame his brother for wanting the comfort of a woman when he had learned of their brother's false deaths. If he had only gotten to Winterfell sooner, Brynden wondered if his brother's folly could have been avoided. There was no point in dwelling on the past, however. Brynden needed to be focused on his coming battle against the Bastard of Bolton. His men had been eager for another fight since he had kept them busy repairing the walls and battlements of Winterfell. He doubted it would be much of a fight since Sir Kyle had reported the Bastard had only around 600 men at the Dread Fort. If the Bastard was smart, he would remain hold up the castle, forcing Brynden to lay siege, but after hearing the tales about the Bastard, Brynden doubted he would have the patience to hide behind the castle walls. Brynden was also not patient, and he did not plan to lay siege to the castle as King Harlon Stark had done. If the Bastard decided not to lead an attack when Brynden approached the castle, he planned to use siege towers to raze it to the ground. Lord Bolton would not be happy about it, but he should have known better than to leave a bastard like Ramsay Snow in command of the Dread Fort. Bran and Rickon would not be happy about Brynden leaving, but he had no choice. The Bastard of Bolton had to answer for what he had done, and their way was the way of the first men. It fell on to Brynden to deliver the Bastard's sentence as the Stark in Winterfell. Brynden would not hesitate to take the Bastard's life, as he would avenge Sir Roderick, Maester Lewin, and everyone who was killed during the sack of Winterfell. "See to it that our men are ready to march," Brynden told Robert Glover. The man had become one of his staunchest champions since Brynden had retaken Deepwood Motte and freed his family from the Ironborn. The Bastard of Bolton has lived long enough. It is time that he answered for the crimes he has committed. "What of King Robb, my prince?" Small Jan Umber asked. "He's commanded for us to set sail for Seaguard." "I have not forgotten my brother's command," Brynden replied. Robb's Raven had arrived a few days after Mother's, informing him to take the ships he had captured from the Iron Fleet and sail for Seaguard. His brother had not mentioned what his intentions were with the ships, but Brynden knew his brother could wait a little while longer. The North will not be safe so long as Ramsay Snow is at large. We've all seen what he has done, and the Bastard must answer for what he has done. I will not leave the North until I have the Bastard's head on a spike. The Black Wolf. Robert Glover roared. The Demon of the North. Several of his other bannermen added. "Let's go kill some Boltons." Brynden roared, and they all cheered his name. "I'm coming for you, Bastard, and not even the Dread Fort will be able to protect you from me." Once he had dismissed the War Council, Brynden made his way to where Bran and Rickon would be, with Shadow and his guards trailing behind him. Outside men were readying themselves for battle, but they stopped to bow and greet him as he passed by them. Winterfell was packed just as the day when Robb had called the banners for war. The yard rang to the sound of sword and axe, the rumble of wagons, and the barking of dogs. You would never have believed the castle had been sacked a while ago with all the men roaming about. Brynden was certain Rickon would not be happy when he learned that he was leaving again. His baby brother had been overjoyed the first time when they were reunited outside the crypts of Winterfell. He still found it hard to believe at times that his brothers had managed to evade Theon and his Ironborn by hiding out in their father's tomb. Brindon was grateful that Theon was not smart enough to search the crypts when they had slipped through his clutches. All that mattered now though to Brindon was that his brothers were alive and safe. Brindon found his brothers in the Godswood, playing with their wolves while Osha and the reeds watched. "Bran, Rickon!" he called out as he approached them. Shadow bounded off to greet Summer and Shaggy while his brothers ran over to him. "You're leaving?" Bran blurted out, and Brindon knew that his face had given it away. "Aye, the walls and battlements have been repaired and it is past time that I march on the dread fort. You will be the Stark in Winterfell in my place when I am gone." "But you just got back," Rickon cried out. "I know, but Mother will be back home soon and she'll look after you two while I am in the south with Robb. Be good for Bran, baby brother." Brindon smiled as he reached down and ruffled Rickon's hair. "You two look out for each other and Mother will be back before you know it." To his surprise, Rickon did not complain as he did the first time when he and Robb had to leave. "I promise. Don't worry, you two will be safe once I have dealt with the bastard of Bolton," Brindon said. "What about the Kingslayer?" Bran asked. "He'll be coming with us. It's best not to keep the Kingslayer in one place for too long and I don't want to leave him here with you two." Even with all the guards watching their prisoner, Brindon did not want to take the chance of the Kingslayer escaping and taking one of his brothers as a hostage. He had just gotten them back and he did not want to expose them to any more danger. "Asha will also be accompanying me." His bannerman did not approve of him bringing a Greyjoy into his bed, but Brindon didn't care. If they knew what kind of woman Asha was in bed, he was certain they would do the same and not complain about it. She was even better in bed than Ros was, and the best part about having Asha in his bed was that he did not have to pay her to fuck her. The only one he was worried about finding out about his relationship with Asha was his mother, as he could already imagine the look of disapproval on her face when she found out. "When will you be back?" Bran asked. "Soon, I hope. Robb and I will have our hands full dealing with the Lannisters and the Tyrells, but we'll defeat them just as we did with the Ironborn and the Kingslayer. Try and stay out of trouble while I'm gone and listen to the Maestas Council. Keep up with your sparring, Bran." His brother's skills had improved since Brindon had last seen him, but he was still young and nowhere close to his or Jon's level. "How can I do that when I'm busy ruling Winterfell?" "I'm sure you'll find the time to practice," Brindon replied. "We'll see each other again soon, I promise." With that, Brindon took his leave and headed out to the yard beneath the gatehouse, where his men waited for him. Brindon grinned when he spotted Asha waiting for him. She truly was an Ironborn, lean and long-legged, with black hair cut short, wind-chafed skin, and strong sure hands. Her nose was too big and too sharp for her thin face, but her smile and the way she fucked made up for it. He truly was a lucky man to have a woman like her as his mistress. Despite Asha being his prisoner and mistress, he had given her more freedom than the Kingslayer was allowed. He was surprised that she had not tried to kill him yet and knew it was probably because of his wolf's presence. "How's my favorite Ironborn woman?" Brindon smirked as he mounted his horse. "I'm the only Ironborn woman you know," Asha replied. True enough, Brindon shrugged as he wheeled his horse around and trotted away, with Shadow and Asha following him. He looked back at the castle and wondered how long it would be before he would see Winterfell again. Sakal Condon went before them through the gate, carrying the rippling white banner of House Stark atop a high standard of grey ash. Asha Greyjoy and Robert Glover fell in on either side of him, and their knights formed up in a double column behind them. Brindon was reminded of the first time he had left Winterfell with Robb, and it had been Theon and the Great Jon riding with them to free their father and sisters from the Lannisters. Now their father was gone, but Brindon would not rest until his sisters were safely back home again. The Lannisters weren't the only ones who paid their debts. 578 Chapter 11, War of the Wolves. Here is my second attempt at another medieval battle. Hopefully this one is better than the battle on the Fever River. Update. Definitely not doing the polygamy thing. I apologize for the mistake I made. It was a spur-of-the-moment thought that I had and regret coming up with it. Asha will remain as his mistress, nothing more. Forget that I ever thought of this idea. Anyway, shout out to new reviewers, Siegmund Kuzland, Dayan Leonhardt, Wolfking0811, Drakhus von Karstein, Lil Nudger 82, Jamal, Kid Chaos 69, Golden Dragon King, The Flower of the Court, Triton, and to returning reviewers, Dipsy, Gravio, Titan, Powers 045, Onix Zeta 98, Ravens 18, War Bible, Master of Dragons God, Jean d'Arc, Vandal, Blaze 1992, and Guest. Enjoy and review. They had stopped for the night after crossing the White Knife River and had made camp a few days from the Dread Fort. Asher had joined Brynden inside his pavilion to pleasure him while his wolf was curled up by the fire, but she had grown used to his presence. When Brynden was inside her, all of her worries disappeared, and she enjoyed the feeling, letting her lust take over her body. None of the Northern Lords approved of her relationship with their prince, but neither Asher nor Brynden cared about it. To them she was just a squid, but in the eyes of their prince, Asher was Brynden's mistress. Asher wanted to be more than that if it meant saving her people from ruin and giving them a life that her father could never hope to achieve. The Ironborn were not a forgiving people, and Asher had been defeated once already, and she did not know how her father or people would react if she came back home with a Stark as her husband, yet she was her father's heir with her uncle Victorian dead and Theon's whereabouts were unknown. Her father had given her people only war and defeat, but she hoped to give them peace and land to settle on. Asher knew it would not be easy convincing Brynden Stark to take her as his wife after the battles their people had fought, but she had to try in order to shield her people from his fury. His house needed allies if they hoped to prevail against the South. Even bedwarmers and prisoners have ears, and she had heard all the talk at Winterfell, when Prince Brynden and his commanders were discussing their battle plans of the Dread Fort. His brother, King Robb had wed some western wench, losing the support of the Freys of the Crossing, and the Lannisters had formed an alliance with the Tyrells and the Martells of Dorne. She doubted the Starks would be able to hold the Riverlands against all of the South by themselves. When they had finished, Brynden rolled off and climbed from their bed, and crossed over to where his maps were laid out. Her loins still ached from the urgency of his love-making. It was a good ache. She could feel his seed within her. Asher had lost count of how many times Brynden had spilled his seed inside of her. She would not at all be surprised to find out that she was pregnant with his child. You should get some sleep, Brynden told her while he hovered over his maps, naked as the day he was born. So should you. Asher wondered if now would be the best time to propose her offer to him. A warrior needed to be focused before going into battle, but she didn't know if she would get another chance to tell him. Brynden was neither betrothed nor wed at the moment, and their union could put an end to the blood feud between their two houses and unite their people against the South. He might be the second son, but he was still the heir to the North until his brother had a son. Not wanting to miss this chance, Asher got out of bed, cursing the cold, and crossed over to Brynden, pressing her body against his and wrapping her arms around him. She could never understand how Brynden was used to the cold, but he had told her that the Starks were made for the cold. "Can't stand being alone in bed without me, can you?" Brynden asked. "We need to talk," Asher said, ignoring his jape. "About what?" "An alliance." "There's nothing to talk about." Asher knew he would be difficult, but she had to make him see her point. "You need allies if you hope to defeat your enemies. I can give you that." She did not know if she truly could, but it would not serve her cause to show doubt before this prince. "I have your ships. What else can your people give me that I already have?" "Peace without further bloodshed. If you decide to attack the Iron Islands, you will lose men, and we both know that you need all the men you can get if you hope to defeat your enemies. With my uncle dead and Theon missing, I am my father's heir. We both know what happened the last time we tried to form an alliance with your people. Your people tried to invade my lands and slaughtered my people. Had I not been wary of your brother and known that my brother sent yours to negotiate an alliance with your father, things might have been different and your people might have taken the North, and I never would have known that my brothers were still alive after your brother's folly. What makes this time any different?" Asher could sense his anger, but remained calm despite knowing that this man had also slaughtered her own men. She had lost good men that day when Brynden Stark had retaken Deepwood Motte and defeated her in the woods, but she would not let the past affect her as it did to her father. She was in this mess because of her father's desire for revenge. "Marriage and lands for my people to settle on. In exchange they will help man and crew your ships. We both know that you need sailors and captains. The Ironborn were born to sail on the waters and yours have no experience at sea." Brynden freed himself from her embrace and turned around to face her with a surprised look on his face. "Marriage? And what lands are we talking about?" I doubt your father or my brother would agree to this. Our marriage, Stark and Greyjoy. Cape Kraken, Sea Dragon Point, and the Stony Shore, enough land to settle my people on. In return they will swear fealty to the Starks of Winterfell. Why continue this pointless bloodshed when we can unite our people to stand together against the Iron Throne? Leave my father to me. Brynden frowned, as if he was deep in thought. She knew it was a lot to take in, but surely it was enough to convince him to think about it. Their people may be enemies today, but on the morrow, they could be allies united together against the Iron Throne. They both wanted the same thing, freedom from the rule of the South. I need time to think about this, Brynden said at last. My bannermen will also need to hear this offer. No doubt they will be wary as I am about forming an alliance with your people, but what you say is true. After my brother's folly we need all the allies we can get if we hope to win this war. Even if it means making peace with our enemies. Asher smiled. That is all that I ask. Now come back to bed with me. Brynden smirked. Admit it, you can't stand being in bed without me. Never. She pressed her lips against his and led him back to bed, wanting to feel him inside of her and hoping that he would agree to her offer. Her sons were alive. Catelyn couldn't believe it when the Raven had arrived from Winterfell, informing her and Robb of the news. There had been nothing but silence for a while and Catelyn had worried over the fate of her second son until at last word had come down from the north. Winterfell had been retaken, but Sir Rodrik and his host were slaughtered by the Bastard of Bolton and all of the Ironborn holding the castle were put to the sword and her son was now marching on the Dread Fort to have the Bastard answer for his crimes. Catelyn was disappointed when she was informed that Theon Greyjoy was not amongst the dead. The Raven also had news informing the lords that were with Robb of the well-being of their sons. Robb had also been in disbelief when he had learned that his brothers were alive. Catelyn wondered if he had now realized his mistake when he had taken Jane Westerling as his wife and queen. Not for the first time, Catelyn cursed the distance from Winterfell to Riverrun, as if the Raven had arrived sooner, Robb could have been informed and not broken his oath to House Free. It was swords that they needed now more than ever now that the Lannisters had allied with the Tyrells and the Martells. Robb was now alone in this war against the Lannisters. The north may be secured now, but it was the Riverlands they now had to worry about. It would not be easy holding the Riverlands for Catelyn knew all too well of her land's bloody history. Even with Jaime Lannister as their prisoner still, it was only a matter of time before the Lannisters took to the field once more against her son. They had the numbers, but Catelyn was certain Robb would prevail. He had not lost a battle yet against the Lannisters, and when Brynden joined his forces to Robb's they would defeat their enemies together. All Catelyn wanted now was to be reunited with her family, but her girls were still held by the Lannisters at King's Landing. She knew her sons were focused on seceding their lands from the rule of the Iron Throne, yet she couldn't stand knowing that her girls were still captives at King's Landing. Had Jaime Lannister remained at Riverrun, Catelyn was certain she would have freed him if it meant winning her daughter's freedom, knowing that Robb and his lords would never abide to it. Catelyn hoped that when her son resumed his attack on the Westerlands, he would send her back to Winterfell to let her be with Bran and Rickon. It had been so long since she had last seen them and she was relieved to know that they were alive and well. She wondered if Brynden would make it down to the Riverlands before her father passed away. Catelyn knew her father did not have much time left and hoped that he would see her Brynden before he passed. How long does Prince Brynden expect his siege on the Dread Fort will last? I doubt Lord Bolton will be pleased to hear what Brynden plans to do to his castle. Edmure spoke. Her brother had wanted to make amends for his folly with the Battle of the Fords. In retaliation for his bastard sacking Winterfell, Brynden planned to raze the castle to the ground. We will hear what Lord Bolton has to say for his bastard's actions soon enough, Robb told them. As for my brother's actions, he has the right to deliver justice to the Bastard of Bolton as my heir. Will that not make Lord Bolton an enemy though? Her uncle asked. He did not seem to mind at all the first time when he had learned that Sir Rodrik killed his bastard, Robb replied. But what about this time, Catelyn wondered. She remembered the queer cold letter they had received from Roose Bolton the first time he had learned that his bastard had been killed by Sir Rodrik, as if his bastard had meant less to him than one of his dogs. Catelyn did not at all know how that man's mind worked and hoped that he would be more forgiving than Walder Frey. Roose Bolton had crossed the Trident and was marching on Harrenhal as commanded, he wrote. A strong castle, and well garrisoned, but his grace shall have it, if I must kill every living soul within to make it so. He hoped his grace would weigh that against the crimes of his bastard son, whom Sir Roderick Castle had put to death. A fate he no doubt earned. Bolton had written. Tainted blood is ever treacherous, and Ramsay's nature was sly, greedy, and cruel. I count myself well rid of him. The true-born sons my young wife has promised me would never have been safe while he lived. Caitlin wondered what his response would be this time when he learned what her son planned to do to his castle when he was done with his bastard. This time would be different, though, her uncle pointed out, voicing her thoughts. Your brother will put all of the garrison to the sword and raze the castle to the ground. Those men should have thought twice then before following Bolton's bastard into sacking Winterfell. Robb snapped. They are traitors and Brynden has the right to punish them as he sees fit. I doubt Lord Bolton will see it that way, Ed Muir said. Lord Bolton will have a chance to prove his loyalty in the coming battle against the Lannisters when Brynden joins us, Robb said. The man has proven himself loyal so far to our cause and I have not doubted him yet. It was his bastard that betrayed us, not Roose Bolton. I hope you are right, her uncle said. We need allies, not enemies, now more than ever if we hope to win this war. When Brynden joins us once he is done in the north, we might just stand a chance. Robb said. For all their sakes, Caitlin hoped that Robb was right. The pain had been excruciating and constant. Theon wanted it all to end, but Ramsay persisted with the torture. He had lost track of how long it had been since he had been brought to the Dread Fort. Down in the dungeons, it was hard to tell when it was day or night. For a time he wondered if this was the punishment he had earned for what he had done to the miller's boys. How long did he have to endure this pain before he was finally put out of his misery? Theon wanted it to end, but Ramsay would have none of that. He did not want to forget his name, but when he resisted and defied Ramsay the pain would increase tenfold. Serve me and obey, Ramsay would tell him, and I will let you live and keep the parts that you still have. He would never become his Reek, but there were times when he was tempted to surrender to put an end to the pain. Brynden Stark would come for him, Theon knew, and when he did he would finally be put out of his misery. He would rather die by the dark great sword Brynden wielded than continue to be tortured by Ramsay. Anything at this point was better than remaining a prisoner of the Dread Fort. Yet Brynden Stark had not come, and Theon wondered what was taking him so long. Did he not know that it was Ramsay, not Theon, who had sacked Winterfell and slaughtered Sir Roderick's host? It would have been just his luck for Brynden to believe that he was dead and not knowing that Ramsay was the real culprit behind the sack of Winterfell. Not for the first time, Theon wished he had heeded Asha's advice and returned with her to Deepwood Motte instead of being the fool that he was and believing that he could hold Winterfell against Brynden Stark. Theon did not know how much longer he would be able to endure the pain before he submitted, but he wanted to at least be himself when Brynden Stark came to end his and Ramsay's lives. Nothing would give him more satisfaction than watching Brynden Stark take Ramsay's head. Sooner or later the bastard would get what he deserved, and not even the Dread Fort would be able to protect him from the Demon of the North. It was the only thing that kept him sane in his cell. To his horror, Theon heard the door to his cell open and the sound of footsteps as they grew louder and louder. Please gods, he isn't coming for me, he prayed. He knew what was coming next if it was Ramsay. Go away, he prayed, go away, please, please. But the footsteps stopped just when they were loudest, and he shrieked when the light hit him full in the face. Ramsay smiled as his face appeared in front of Theon's. Ramsay was an ugly man, big-boned and slope-shouldered, with a fleshiness to him that suggested that in later life he would run to fat. His skin was pink and blotchy, his nose broad, his mouth small, his hair long and dark and dry. His lips were wide and meaty, but the thing men noticed first about him were his eyes. He had his Lord Father's eyes, small, close-set, queerly pale. Ghost grey, some men called the shade, but in truth his eyes were all but colourless, like two chips of dirty ice. Hello again, my friend, Ramsay greeted. What piece should we take off today, or have you decided to submit? I'm Theon Greyjoy, he replied. No, you are not, you are Reek. It seems that we will have to peel off some more of your skin today. Theon knew what was coming. Ramsay preferred to flay the skin and let the exposed flesh dry and crack and fester. Theon had been whipped and racked and cut, but there was no pain half so excruciating as the pain that followed flaying. It was the sort of pain that drove men mad, and it could not be endured for long. Sooner or later the victim would scream, "Please, no more, stop it hurting, cut it off," and Ramsay would oblige. It was a game they played. Theon had learned the rules, despite his defiance, as his hands and feet could testify, but that one time he had forgotten and tried to end the pain himself, with his teeth. Ramsay had not been pleased, and the offense had cost Theon another toe. Before Ramsay could begin they were interrupted by another sound of footsteps as a guard entered the cell. Ramsay frowned and turned to face the guard. "What is it?" "Pardon for the intrusion, but Brynden Stark has crossed the White Knife River with a host of 11,000 men. They mean to attack the Dread Fort." At last, Theon thought with glee. He knew that sooner or later Brynden Stark would learn the truth about the sack and would come to seek justice. He would soon be free of the torment and Ramsay would meet his end. Theon knew that this news had saved him from another day of flaying. Theon wondered how the bastard would act against the Black Wolf. "Ready the men for battle. Let's go ride out and greet our prince," Ramsay ordered. "Fool," Theon wanted to tell him, but knew it would be wiser to remain silent. Brynden Stark would not make the same mistake Sir Roderick had made if he was marching on the Dread Fort. Someone had to have told him about the sack, but who, Theon wondered. "Would it not be wiser to wait for them to come to us?" the guard asked. Ramsay smiled. "We'll take them out the same way we took out his castellan." Brynden lay awake, thinking about the offer Asha had proposed to him. Asha nestled against him, one arm draped lightly over his, her breasts brushing his back. He could hear her breathing, soft and steady. It was hard not for him to think about it when all that went through his mind was the thought of Asha being his wife. The last time he had thought about marriage was at the Twins when Robb had agreed to take one of Walder Frey's daughters as his wife in order to cross. If he agreed to Asha's offer he would not make the same mistake Robb did and would immediately wed her to seal their alliance. Most of his bannermen's reactions had been exactly as he had predicted when he had told them about Asha's offer. Even Robert Glover, his staunchest champion, had opposed the offer. None of them liked the idea of settling the Ironborn on Cape Crooken, Sea Dragon Point, and the Stony Shore. "The squid asks for too much," they had told him. He knew that Asha asked for a lot, but as much as Brynden agreed with his bannermen, they needed allies if they hoped to defeat their enemies. It was also hard for Brynden to tell if his bannermen disagreed because they wanted one of their daughters to be his wife. If it were not for Robb's folly with his marriage to the Western wench, Brynden would never have considered it. Now it was a different story. As the heir to the north, Brynden knew that he would have to sooner or later marry, but never thought it would be with the daughter of a great house, not to mention a Greyjoy. He wondered if his mother or Robb would approve of his decision if he decided to accept Asha's offer. The only problem he saw with Asha's offer was dealing with her father. It would be no easy task convincing Balon Greyjoy, as the man had already spurned his brother's offer for an alliance once before. He had no idea if things would be any different if Asha was to be his wife. Despite his mistrust of Balon Greyjoy, Asha assured him that he had always preferred her as his heir after Theon was sent to Winterfell as his father's ward. Brynden could see why, as Asha was certainly a woman who could lead better than Theon ever could. She was also certainly a lot more forgiving than he was, realizing the importance of being allies than enemies. Not for the first time Brynden wished that father was here. He would know what to do in this situation, but he was gone, along with Maester Lewin and Sir Roderick. It would ultimately be his decision whether or not he should agree to Asha's offer of an alliance. Asha must have been thinking about the offer when she had first gone into bed with him, obeying and pleasuring the man who had slaughtered her men. She certainly was not like any of the ladies he had encountered. Most would have tried to resist if they had been in Asha's position. Brynden was starting to regret the first night they were together when he had raped her in his anger, when he had thought that Theon had killed his brothers. He had let his emotions get the better of him, blaming her and her people for the deaths of his brothers, not knowing that they were alive. He was a Stark of Winterfell, he should have been better than that. Still, Asha made a good point about invading the Iron Islands. Brynden was certain that they would be able to defeat the Ironborn, but it would cost them. With Stannis Baratheon defeated and the South under the control of the Lannisters, Brynden knew that they needed all the men they could get. Attacking the Iron Islands would only hurt their cause and weaken their armies, giving the Lannisters the opportunity to attack them. He hated to admit it, but Asha was right. They needed the Ironborn and the Ironborn needed them if they hoped to prevail against the Iron Throne. Asher murmured sleepily as Brindon slid out from under her arm and rolled over onto his side to look at her. She had a faded pink scar on her pretty neck, and the smell of her enticed him, salt and sweat and women. Smirking, Brindon slid his hand up and squeezed her breasts. Her breasts were small, but he liked the firmness of them. Her eyes snapped open and he could see the sparkle in her dark eyes. Asher smiled and he could feel her hand reach down and stroke his manhood. She had the wickedest smile he'd ever seen on a woman. Looks like someone is eager down there. Is my body that irresistible for you? You have no idea. Brindon grinned, reaching down and grabbing Asher by the waists before rolling onto his back, with Asher on top of him. I could use some distraction before the coming battle. They were a day's march from the Dread Fort and Brindon wanted his men well and rested before they attacked. They might have the numbers but the Boltons had the advantage if they decided to hole up in the castle. He would lose more men storming the castle than the Boltons would. My favorite position, Asher said as she slid his manhood inside her and began to grind her body against his. Damn, this woman knew how to fuck. Squeezing her rear end, Brindon lifted himself off the bed as Asher continued to ride him and pressed his lips against hers while her breasts pressed against his chest. He could feel her nipples harden as their tongues fought for dominance, tugging and pulling the other while their saliva mixed together. Eventually he could feel his manhood ready to burst and they climaxed together, with his seed shooting into Asher's womb. He fell back onto the bed and Asher rested her head on his shoulder. With the amount of times he had spilled his seed inside of her, Brindon was certain she would be carrying his child by now. If she was, Brindon did not want their child to grow up as a bastard like Jon Snow, but to prevent that he would have to take her as his wife and Brindon was still uncertain of Asher's offer. Indeed, it was an alliance his house needed after Robb had broken their alliance with the Freys of the Crossing and Brindon doubted a better one would come anytime soon with the Martells and Tyrells allied with the Lannisters. The only great house left that had not committed itself to the war was House Arryn. The Knights of the Vale could make all the difference in this war, but Aunt Lysa refused to aid them against the Lannisters. Even when they had won every battle and secured the north, Brindon could not help but wonder if they stood a chance against the might of the south. If it was at Moat Cailin, they would be able to throw their armies back easily, but it was the Riverlands they had to worry about. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a war horn blasting. The horns called through the night, wild and urgent, a cry that said hurry hurry hurry. He heard shouts, the clatter of spears, the whicker of horses, though nothing yet that spoke to him of fighting. Just when I thought I was going to be able to get some rest, Asher muttered. It's Sir Kyle's war horns, Brindon told her as he rolled her off him and got out of bed. Shadow bared his teeth and let out a low rumble. The flap to his pavilion opened and Harry-on Karstark entered. What is it? Brindon asked, throwing on a tunic and slipping his legs through his breeches. Sir Kyle and his outriders have engaged the bastard of Bolton's men. They count no more than 600 men in his party. Harry-on told him, ignoring the state of undress Asher was in while Brindon put on his armor. Saves us the trouble of having to lay siege to the castle. I want our men to surround them to prevent them from retreating. If possible, I want the bastard brought to me alive. I want the bastard to die by my hands. Brindon told Harry-on. I will see to it at once, my prince. Harry-on bowed and took his leave. The bastard is a fool if he believed that he could catch you off guard, Asher said as she covered herself up in her furs. No doubt he thought he could catch me off guard as he did with Sir Roderick, Brindon said. Did the bastard truly expect that he could take on Brindon's host of 11,000 with just 600 men? Brindon wondered what the bastard was thinking when he had decided to leave the safety of the walls of the Dread Fort to engage his army. It was obvious to Brindon that the bastard had no skills at commanding if he believed that he could defeat Brindon. It almost made him feel sorry for the men that were following the bastard into battle. There's no need for you to get up, Brindon told Asher as he opened the flap to his pavilion, with Shadow bounding off for battle. This will be over before you know it. Asher smirked. Just don't take too long. Like that will happen. Brindon exited the pavilion and headed over to where his horse was. His guards were waiting for him as Brindon mounted his steed. Time for us to spill some Bolton blood, men. Black Wolf. They cheered as they rode off to join the others in battle. Brindon heard the screams of the horses, the shouting of men, and the clash of steel on steel before they arrived at the site of the battle. The flayed man of the Boltons could be seen as the riders struggled to control their horses while Karstark's spearmen thrust their spears at them. Brynden had no doubt that Harry-on would be among them, commanding the attack. He just hoped that the bastard did not die in the first charge. A hiss of arrows fell down on the Boltons, taking a few of them with them down before Brynden and his guards charged into the fray. Unsheathing ice, Brynden swung it down on the first Bolton that came into his sight. He had never been good at fighting on horseback as Robb had been, but this battle was nothing more than a massacre and Brynden was eager to shed the blood of the men that had sacked Winterfell. The next Bolton that he had faced was not so easy as the first one he had struck down. This one was big and muscled, and refused to go down without a fight. Brynden was happy to give it to him. Their swords danced in the night as they struck each other, waiting for the other to show an opening of weakness. The Bolton man was the first to lose focus as Shadow emerged from the darkness and snapped his fangs at the rider's horse. Brynden took the opportunity to swing ice at his foe, taking the man's head right off of him. The head bounced off into the darkness while the body slumped off the horse and the steed galloped off as Shadow descended onto the corpse. Riding off in search of another target, Brynden rode down a Bolton man that was chasing after a fleeing horse. By then the rest of the Boltons had been dealt with as the archers picked off any stragglers. Making his way through the battlefield, Brynden spotted Sir Kyle and a few of his outriders. "Sir Kyle!" Brynden called out. Sir Kyle and his riders rode over to him. "My prince," Sir Kyle bowed. "Did your men manage to capture the bastard?" "We did. They are waiting for you. Take me to him." It was time for Brynden to face the man responsible for destroying his home. He would finally get to avenge Maester Luwin, Sir Roderick, and all the other men that had tried to retake Winterfell from Theon Greyjoy. Sir Kyle led Brynden to an ugly-looking man, with a pale pink cloak streaming from his shoulders. When he looked at the man, Brynden instantly knew he was the bastard when he saw his eyes. They were just like Roose Bolton's. "Do you know who I am, bastard?" Brynden asked. Brynden Stark. The bastard clearly did not like being called a bastard. It was time that someone finally put him in his place before he put an end to his miserable life. Only a fool would have believed that he would have stood a chance against such odds, bastard. Did you truly believe that you would have been able to catch me off guard as you did with Sir Roderick, bastard? "Don't call me a bastard," Ramsay Snow snarled. "I am a Bolton, the son of Roose Bolton, Lord of the Dreadfort, not a Snow." "You are a Snow, bastard," Brynden told him, and his men held Ramsay down as he tried to lash out at him. Shadow emerged from the darkness and bared his teeth at him. "That makes you a bastard. You are a Snow, not a Bolton, and you will die as what you are, a bastard." He unsheathed ice and took hold of it with both hands. Brynden had seen his father do it so many times in the past that he knew what needed to be done. His men forced the bastard's head down as he struggled to glare at him while Shadow growled ready to act if the bastard tried anything. "In the name of Robb Stark, King in the North and of the Trident, by the word of Brynden of House Stark, Prince of Winterfell, I do sentence you to die." He lifted the great sword high above his head and took off the bastard's head with a single sure stroke. Blood sprayed out across the ground as the head rolled across it. All that was left now was the Dreadfort. Sir Kyle approached him as he sheathed ice. "Do we continue as planned, my prince? Raise the castle to the ground until there is nothing left. We're done here." Chapter 12, A Storm of Swords. So after some thought, I decided not to have Brynden raise the Dreadfort, but spare it. Also, as I said last chapter, I will not do a polygamy thing with Asher /Brynden/ and Val. So there won't be an alliance between the North and the Iron Islands, and the invasion of the Isles will continue as planned. Enjoy and review. They had arrived at Seaguard a few days after they had departed from Deepwood Motte, sailing into Iron Man's Bay with a fleet of over 130 ships. True to his word, Lord Marndaly had sent captains and sailors to man the ships for them. To Brynden's surprise, he had also learned that Lord Marndaly had been constructing another fleet at White Harbour, with over 40 war galleys completed so far, and many more hidden up the White Knife River. With the Ironborn all but defeated, the North would truly hold power at sea with the royal fleets of the Lannisters and the Baratheons destroyed in the Blackwater, with the only threat being the Red Wine fleet in the Reach. Once this mess with the Freys was dealt with, nothing would be able to stop them from sacking the southern castles the Lannisters controlled. It was still hard for Brynden to believe that he would finally be seeing Robb and Mother again. So much had happened that Brynden didn't know if he would be able to face them after everything he had done in the north. His mother would no doubt disapprove of Brynden fathering a bastard. He had left Asha behind at Winterfell when he had learned that she was pregnant. Hopefully he would be able to convince Robb to legitimize his child when they were born to spare them of the same life Jon Snow had endured as a bastard. The only thing Brynden regretted at the moment was missing his grandfather's funeral. Lord Jason Mallister had informed Brynden of his grandfather's passing when they had greeted one another. He barely knew his grandfather and wondered if Robb ever had the chance to speak with him while he was at Riverrun. There were too many leagues between them and Riverrun, and their father rarely left the north. No doubt his mother mourned Lord Hoster's passing, but at least she would have some comfort knowing that Bran and Rickon were still alive and safe at Winterfell. As much as he had loathed to part with Sir Kyle, the commander of his Outriders, Brynden had left Sir Kyle behind in the north to serve as Castellan of Winterfell. Even with the bastard of Bolton killed and the Ironborn purged from the north, Brynden did not want to take any chances when it came to the safety of his brothers. He would never be able to forgive himself if he lost his brothers again. Still, Brynden would miss having Sir Kyle by his side in battle. Sir Kyle had played a part in every victory he had won against the Greyjoys in the north. Robert Glover had taken command of the Scouts and Outriders in his place. It was Robert Glover who had convinced Brynden to spare the Dread Fort from his wrath. The father should not pay for the sins of his son, nor the son for the sins of his father, Robert Glover had told him. Realizing that he had let his emotions get the better of him again, Brynden reluctantly had spared the Dread Fort from the same fate Winterfell had suffered. Roose Bolton had been nothing but loyal since the Green Fork. He doubted his bannermen would be pleased if he had gone through with his decision to raise the Dread Fort. It would be just one more enemy they would be facing when they already had so many to deal with in the south. He would only have made matters worse by turning the Boltons of the Dread Fort against them. The only good thing that came out of sparing the Dread Fort was that the remaining men had presented their captive, Theon Greyjoy, to Brynden. Robb would no doubt be pleased to hear that Brynden was bringing Theon Greyjoy with him. Soon, it was only a matter of time before Brynden would get to see Robb take Theon's head off. The Turncloak deserved to suffer more like the bastard of Bolton, but it was no longer Brynden's place to pass the judgment. He just hoped that Robb would take off Theon's head before he headed off to the twins for Uncle Edmure's wedding. Brynden wished that the rain would let up so that he could get to Robb faster. It had been a drizzle at first when they had left Seaguard with 2,000 veterans from the Fever River, but after a few days on the road it had begun to fall even harder. Robb would have to pass Old Stones before reaching the twins, and that was there they would meet before he returned to Seaguard with Mother, while Robb continued on to the twins with Uncle Edmure and an escort of 500 men. The rest of Robb's men would follow Brynden back to Seaguard, and Brynden would send Mother back north to Winterfell, where Bran and Rickon waited for her return. 5 days later, Brynden, Lord Mallister, and their men had finally reached Old Stones. The rain had not helped in their journey, as it had been difficult crossing the turbulent Blue Fork. Scouts had spotted them, and Brynden saw that it was Silver-mailed Fist of the Glovers. Even through all this rain, Brynden was just glad that they had finally made it. Robb had made camp upon a hill overlooking the Blue Fork, within a ruined stronghold of the ancient River Kings. His fellow riders called out to Robb as they made their way through the camp. Some of them spat when they saw who was riding with them. Brynden looked over his shoulder at Theon while making his way to where Robb was. "You will die soon enough, Turncloak." Looking back, Brynden smiled when he saw his brother and mother emerge from their tent. As much as he wanted to rush over and embrace them, Brynden reminded himself that he was a prince and a warrior. Their reunion would have to wait, for he brought other news other than Theon that he knew Robb would no doubt want to hear. "What took you so long?" Robb asked as he crossed over to Brynden and threw his arms around him, pulling him into an embrace. "It's good to see you, brother." "I thought I'd never see you again," Brynden admitted, hugging Robb back. He smiled when he saw Grey Wind and Shadow greet each other. They released their grip and Robb moved to the side as Brynden made his way over to Mother. It had been so long since he had seen her. "Mother," he breathed out. "Brynden," she cried out in joy as she threw her arms around him and held him in a grip tighter than Robb's. "I've missed you so much." You and me both. Brynden chuckled and freed himself from her embrace. Your Grace, I brought a gift for you. He nodded to two of his guards and Theon was thrown into the mud, chained and gagged. Where did you find him? Robb asked, not even glancing at Theon while looking at Brynden. At the Dread Fort. It seems that the bastard of Bolton had been having some fun with him before I took his head. The men at the Dread Fort were glad to give him up when I demanded they surrender. You didn't raise the castle. No, I let my emotions get the better of me. It won't happen again. I'm sure Lord Bolton will be pleased to hear that when he joins me at the Twins. You're lucky I haven't told him about your decision yet. What will be done with the Turncloak? Brynden hoped that Robb would just execute him and be done with him. He dies once I have finished questioning him. But first, I hear that you and Lord Mallister bring news from Seaguard that requires my attention. We do. Brynden nodded to Lord Mallister as he approached them with a fleshy balding man with a cringing look to him. This is the captain of the Myraham, a merchant out of Old Town. We'll take this inside. Have your guards watch over your prisoner. I will speak with him when we are done. Robb ordered. Once they were inside, they waited for the other lords to join them. The Great Jon entered first, along with Galbart and Robert Glover, Mage Mormont, Uncle Ed Muir, and a young knight Brynden didn't recognize in a sand-colored surcoat blazoned with seashells. Who is the newcomer? Brynden asked, knowing that he would not like the answer. I forgot, you two have not met. Brynden, this is Sir Reynold Westerling, brother to my queen, Jane Westerling. Robb introduced. The young and lean man, with a thick mop of chestnut hair, bowed. Well met, Prince Brynden. It is an honor to meet the Black Wolf, or do you prefer to be called the Demon of the North? Call me whatever you like, I do not care. Brynden looked away from the Southron knight and focused his attention on Robb. Your Grace, shall we proceed with why we are all gathered here? Of course. Robb nodded. Captain, tell them what you told me and Lord Mallister. Brynden ordered. My prince. He licked his thick lips nervously. My last port of call for Seaguard, that was Lord Sport on Pike. The Ironmen kept me there more than half a year, they did. King Balon's command. Only, well, the long and the short of it is, he's dead. Balon Greyjoy? His mother asked, with a surprised look. You are telling us that Balon Greyjoy is dead? The shabby little captain nodded. You know how Pike's built on a headland, and part on rocks and islands off the shore, with bridges between. The way I heard it in Lord Sport, there was a blow coming in from the west, rain and thunder, and old King Balon was crossing one of them bridges when the wind got hold of it and just tore the thing to pieces. He washed up 2 days later, all bloated and broken. Crabs at his eyes, I hear. The Great Jon laughed. King Crabs, I hope, to sup upon such royal jelly, eh? The captain bobbed his head. But that's not all of it, no. He leaned forward. The brother's back. Euron. Crow's Eye, they call him, as black a pirate as ever raised a sail. He's been gone for years, but Lord Balon was no sooner cold than there he was, sailing into Lord Sport in his silence. Black sails and a red hull, and crewed by mutes. He'd been to Ass High and back, I heard. Wherever he was, though, he's home now, and he marched right into Pike and sat his ass in the seastone chair, and drowned Lord Botley in a cask of seawater when he objected. That was when I ran back to Myraham and slipped anchor, hoping I could get away whilst things were confused. And so I did, and here I am. Captain, said Robb when the man was done, you have my thanks, and you will not go unrewarded. Lord Jason and my brother will take you back to your ship when we are done. Pray wait outside. That I will, your grace. That I will. No sooner had he left the king's pavilion than the Great Jon began to laugh, but Robb silenced him with a look. Euron Greyjoy is no man's notion of a king, if half of what Theon said of him was true. Theon is the rightful heir, but not for long. Now is the right moment for us to strike the Iron Islands and rid ourselves of the Ironborn once and for all. The Great Jon grinned. I look forward to spilling the blood of those squids. They'll rue the day they decided to attack the north. Your Grace, Uncle Ed Muir interrupted. What of the Lannisters and the Tyrells? Once we are done with the Ironborn we will control the Sunset Sea with the fleet that my brother has brought to us. Lannisport will be my first target. Sir Davin Lannister has reformed the remnants of his father's army from Oxcross at Lannisport. Brynden will lead the attack on the Iron Islands while I will lead the attack on Lannisport. With their forces depleted from their attack on the north, Brynden will be able to easily the Ironborn down. Once he is done, Brynden will join us in the west if Lannisport has not yet fallen by that time. If we move swiftly once my uncle's wed, we can all be in position by year's end. We will fall on the Iron Islands and Lannisport on the first day of the new century. I like this plan, said the Great Jon. I like it well. Our enemies won't know what hit them when we are done with them, Brynden added. It seemed that he had made the right decision to not accept Asher's offer. He would have made the same mistake that Robb had made with Jeyne Westerling. She was nothing more than his mistress, and Brynden vowed he would not make the same mistake again. It was time for the Ironborn to end. Lord Balon has left chaos in his wake, we hope. Robb continued. Once the Ironborn are dealt with, the Lannisters will be next. The Tyrells will be dealt with when the Lions are all but weakened. They may have the numbers, but their men are not battle-hardened like ours are. It will be up to the Blackfish and the River Lords to stand their ground while we strike our enemies. We will, Your Grace. Uncle Edmure bowed. You are all dismissed. There are matters I wish to discuss with my family. The other lords bowed and took their leave until it was just Brynden, Robb, Mother, and Uncle Edmure left in the pavilion. How many men did you bring with you? 10,000, Brynden replied. I hoped to bring more, but I thought it best to leave the rest in the north in case we are attacked again. It will be enough. Once this wedding is finished and the Freys are brought back into the fold, we will be able to concentrate our attacks on the south. I doubt Casterly Rock will fall easily. It's King's Landing we should be attacking, not Casterly Rock. Brynden pointed out. But Lord Tywine will look weak if we take his home. He will have nowhere left to run to when we march on to King's Landing. I hope you are right about this. So do I. Now if you will excuse me, I think it's time that I spoke with our prisoner. It was damp and cold in the cell that Theon had been thrown into. He opened his eyes when he heard a familiar voice from outside his cell and was not at all surprised to see Robb standing in front of him. Theon had never expected that he would meet Robb like this. Robb, who had been more a brother to Theon than any son born of Balon Greyjoy's loins. Now a turncloak, who was but a traitor in Robb's eyes and had betrayed his trust and cause. Robb's voice sounded sad and angry when he spoke. Why, Theon? I wanted to prove that I was a true Ironborn to my father, he replied. But he never would be. Theon saw that now. He was nothing but a failure in his father's eyes, a Greyjoy turned Stark. Even his own sister Asha had been seen more as his father's heir than Theon could ever hope to be. He doubted she would be seen as that now that she was defeated by Brynden Stark and was carrying his child. Not that mattered now, since Theon would soon be executed for his crimes against the North. Not even the Night's Watch would spare him from his fate. You betrayed me, Robb said. Did our friendship mean nothing to you? My brother was right not to trust and befriend you. I should have listened to him. You and I could have defeated our enemies together. I wanted to, but my father would hear none of it. He could still remember how much of a fool he had been when he had delivered Robb's terms of an alliance to his father at Pike. I am the Greyjoy, Lord Reaper of Pike, King of Salt and Rock, son of the Sea Wind, and no man gives me a crown. I pay the iron price. I will take my crown, as Aron Red Hand did 5,000 years ago, his father had responded. It was the North his father had wanted to conquer, not the West. Theon doubted there was ever any hope of an alliance between their two houses. Theon remembered Brynden telling him about Asha's offer of an alliance between the North and the Iron Islands against the Iron Throne. Asha was a fool to believe that Brynden would ever consent to her terms. He had been surprised when Brynden told him he had thought about it after he had learned about Robb breaking his alliance with the Freys. Even if their father saw Asha as his heir, Theon doubted his father and the Ironborn would ever go through with it after Asha was defeated and impregnated by a Stark. His father would die before agreeing to those terms. Why didn't you warn me then? You still had a chance to warn the North of an Ironborn invasion. Not like it would have mattered, seeing as how Brynden had retaken all of the castles the Ironborn had captured along with all of their ships. He should have realized that Brynden would be wary of an Ironborn threat given how much the Stark had despised Theon. They were still my family, even if they did not see me as one of them. I chose the wrong family though, I know that now. He knew it would not be enough for all the damage he had caused to the north, but he didn't know what else to say. Ramsay would have succeeded in breaking him had Brynden not arrived any sooner. He probably would still be in the dungeons of the Dread Fort, being tortured by Ramsay until he submitted had Brynden not arrived. Theon didn't care anymore about what anyone thought of him, he was just ready for all of this to end. You did. Robb balled his hand into a fist and Theon saw that it was shaking in anger. Will it be you or Brynden who swings the sword? Lord Eddard Stark had taught his sons that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. Their way was the old way, the way of the first men. I will, though Brynden would prefer to do it himself. Not that I can blame him. Robb replied. He is the bane of my people, Theon muttered. The demon of the north. Once the rain has died down a bit, you will be brought outside to be executed. I should have been gone by now for the twins. Robb told him, turning around and leaving Theon alone in his cell. I'm sorry, Theon whispered. When Theon was brought out, it was grey and chilly, the storm had diminished to a steady, soaking rain, yet even so the camp was crowded. There were a few river lords, but mostly Northmen, veterans of the Whispering Wood. Theon had fought beside, waiting for the traitor to be put to the sword. A headsman's block had been set up by a great carved sepulchre still rested, half hidden in waist-high brown grass amongst a stand of ash. Rain fell all around them as Theon was led through the press, his hands still bound. Robb waited beside the block, holding an unsheathed ice with both hands. No doubt Brynden had lent the sword to Robb to use for the execution. He remembered all the times he had gone with them to watch Lord Eddard Stark to use the sword to execute deserters from the Night's Watch. As a boy, he had lived in fear of Stark's great dark sword, but now Theon welcomed it, waiting to be put out of the pain he had suffered from Ramsay. Theon stepped in front of the block. Robb's face was as stern as Lord Eddard Stark's was when he took a man's life. Kneel, traitor, Robb ordered. Theon knelt and laid his head upon the block. He closed his eyes, waiting for the blade to touch his skin and end his life. Theon Greyjoy, Robb said. Here in sight of gods and men, I judge you guilty of high treason. In mine own name I condemn you. With mine own hand I take your life. Would you speak a final word? I have nothing else to say. The last thing he heard was the howl of a wolf and the crackling of thunder. It was still raining by the time they had made it to Seaguard. Out in the harbour, Catelyn spotted hundreds of ships all bearing the direwolf of Stark. One of those ships would be taking her back home to Winterfell. Catelyn would finally get to see her youngest sons again, but she would also be leaving behind her eldest sons as they remained in the south fighting their enemies. No doubt Brynden had wanted to accompany Robb to the twins, but Robb had insisted that Brynden return to Seaguard with his men. Catelyn just hoped Robb heeded her warning when he arrived at the twins. Tread lightly, Robb, Catelyn had cautioned her son before they had gone their separate ways at Old Stones. Lord Walder has a thin skin and a sharp tongue, and some of these sons of his will doubtless take after their father. You must not let yourself be provoked. I know the phrase, mother. I know how much I wronged them, and how much I need them. I shall be as sweet as a septon. If you are offered refreshment when you arrive, on no account refuse. Take what is offered, and eat and drink where all can see. If nothing is offered, ask for bread and cheese and a cup of wine. I'll be more wet than hungry. Robb, listen to me. Once you have eaten of his bread and salt, you have the guest right, and the laws of hospitality protect you beneath his roof. Robb had looked more amused than afraid. I have an army to protect me, mother, I don't need to trust in bread and salt. But if it pleases Lord Walder to serve me stewed crow smothered in maggots, I'll eat it and ask for a second bowl. Would 500 men be enough, though? Catelyn doubted the loyalty of Lord Roose Bolton since she had learned what the bastard of Bolton had done to Winterfell. Now that same man would be joining her son at the twins for her brother's wedding to Roslyn Frey. The only men Robb had taken with him that she trusted were his guards, a few hundred veterans of the Whispering Wood, and her brother Edmure's modest retinue of friends. The Lords of the Trident had remained to hold the Riverlands while the king and their prince would attack the Iron Islands and the west. Most of the northern lords who had been with Robb since the Whispering Wood had gone with Brynden to Seaguard under Robb's command, with only Lord Rickard Karstark remaining by her son's side. Catelyn was starting to feel hope that they could win now that Brynden had joined his forces with Robb's. Still, even if Edmure and Roslyn were happy in one another, if the late Lord Free could be appeased and his power once more wedded to Robb's, would they be able to defeat the Lannisters and the Tyrells? She had seen how many men the Tyrells could field at Bitterbridge when she had gone to treat with Renly Baratheon. Her sons may have never lost a battle, but would the momentum be enough to push them to victory against the Lannisters? Brynden shared her doubts, and she had been none too pleased when he had suggested abandoning the Riverlands. They would be leaving her brother and the River Lords at the mercy of the Lannisters and their allies. Her uncle the Blackfish was the warden of the southern marches, and she believed he would be able to hold the trident against their enemies. "I hope you are right," her son had told her. It was then that Brynden had confessed to her that he had fathered a bastard. Many men fathered bastards. Catelyn had grown up with that knowledge. She never expected her son to father one though, as she knew her son would not want his bastard to grow up like Jon Snow. Brynden had a man's needs, though, and this Asha Greyjoy had been his prisoner and he had taken her to his bed as his mistress. The Starks were not like other men, and she had no doubt that like Ned, Brynden would want to bring his bastard home with him, and call the babe his child for all the North to see. Mother Catelyn looked up and saw her son standing in front of the doorway to her chambers she was staying in until she departed for the north. Her son wore grey chainmail over bleached leathers, with ice strapped over his back and the Valyrian steel dagger at his waist, and a fur-trimmed coat across his shoulders, with a shiny black direwolf, wrought in gold and obsidian, pinned its folds against his shoulder. "I bring news that I know you will be pleased to hear." "What is it?" With everything that had happened, she could use some good news. "A man named Sandor Clegane claims to have Arya Stark with him. He demands an audience." "Arya," she gasped. There had been no word of her younger daughter's fate since Ned had died. Robb believed that she was dead, but Catelyn held hope that her daughter was alive since she had learned that her sons were alive and well in Winterfell. "What does the man want?" "We're about to find out." Catelyn followed Brynden out into the courtyard where it was still raining. She wondered if Robb had made it yet to the twins. No doubt Lord Walder would take it as an insult if Robb arrived later than promised. Even in the rain, she saw the man's burned face when they approached and his big black stallion. Beside the man she saw a young girl with a long face and grey eyes she knew all too well. "Arya!" she cried out in joy. "Mother, Brynden!" Arya cried out, but was kept close to the man's side. "What do you want for her, Clegane?" Brynden demanded. His face was cold. "A reward, and if you will have me, a place in your service." "Why would I let you join my household? You are Joffrey's dog." "Bugger Joffrey, bugger the Queen, and bugger that twisted little gargoyle she calls a brother. I'm done with their city, done with their Kingsguard, done with Lannisters. From what I hear you could use all the swords you can get. How much do you want for my sister?" 300 gold dragons and a place in your household if you will have me." Brynden frowned. "You will have to prove your worth and loyalty if I take you in. I'll kill Gregor for you, if you'd like. That should be enough to prove my worth. As for loyalty, I'll kill Lannisters for you. I'm done with them." "So be it. We have enough enemies as it is. You will be watched though, until you prove you are loyal to our cause. I am done dealing with turncloaks. I'm still getting paid for the girl." "You are?" Brynden nodded. "Then my sword is yours, my prince. I swear it by the old gods and the new." Sandor unsheathed his sword, knelt and laid it at her son's feet. Catelyn saw that Arya was none too pleased about it. "And I vow that you shall always have a place by my hearth and meat and mead at my table, and pledge to ask no service of you that might bring you into dishonor. I swear it by the old gods and the new. Arise." As the man rose, Catelyn remembered all the times she had seen Ned accept a man's oath of service. "Now, can we get out of this bloody rain?" Sandor asked as Arya rushed over to embrace Catelyn. "Of course, and you have my thanks for returning my sister safely to us," Brynden replied. Chapter 13, The Reigns of Caste Maria. Responses for reviews from the last chapter will be posted in the next update. Enjoy and review. It was hard for Catelyn to believe that Arya was actually here with her when she had believed that she would never see her any of her girls again. The Lannisters had lied when they had told them they held both of her daughters in King's Landing. Now she understood why Sir Cleos Frey had only seen Sansa at court when he had gone to deliver Robb's terms after the camps. It was not because Cersei Lannister was reluctant to parade Arya in open court, but because her daughter had managed to flee the capital with the Night's Watch. To think that she had once thought about trading the Kingslayer for her girls when the Lannisters only had one of them. Her daughter had been through so much to get back to them, but she was safe now and home. Soon the both of them would be back at Winterfell with Bran and Rickon, but Sansa was still a captive in King's Landing. Catelyn wondered if she would ever get a chance to see Sansa again. No doubt she was growing into a beautiful young woman, but Catelyn would not be there to see her grow. She prayed that her sons would win this war and bring Sansa back home safely. The rain had died down for a bit and Brynden decided that now would be the best time for her and Arya to sail back home. As she and Arya said their farewells to Brynden, Shadow prowled around them, stopping only to shake the water from his coat and bare his teeth at the rain. Brian and Sandor Clegane stood guard as well, with some of Brynden's other guards, Small Jon Umber, Daisy Mormont, and Harry on Carstark. True to his word, Brynden kept Sandor with him at all times along with some extra guards and Shadow around until he proved he was loyal to their cause. "I don't want to go," said Arya to Brynden. "I want to stay with you and fight." If Arya had it her way, Catelyn was certain her daughter would try and become a fighter like Brian and Lady Mormont's daughters. She still couldn't believe some of the things Arya had done while she had tried to get back to them. "Keep this up and I'll send you to the twins instead. I'm certain your betrothed would love to meet you." Brynden grinned, messing with Arya's hair. Never. Arya frowned, swatting Brynden's hand away. Arya had been none too pleased when she had learned that she was betrothed to Elmar Frey as part of the conditions for Robb to cross the twins. Elmar had squired for Brynden for a time before Robb had broken his pact with House Frey when he had taken Jane Westerling as his wife, and Catelyn doubted Arya would have to wed Elmar after the pact was broken. No doubt Brynden thought the same, but Arya didn't need to know that. Sandor chuckled. "I pity the lad who has to take her as his wife. She's always been wild," Brynden told Clegane. "I'm surprised you managed to put up with her for so long. There were times when I wondered if she was worth all the trouble. She tried to kill me a couple of times." "I'm right here, you know," Arya said, folding her arms and glaring at her brother. "I know," Brynden sighed. "Now go with Brian onto the ship. Try and not to sneak back off when you're on board. Mother will be worried sick if she lost you again." "Do as your brother says," Catelyn told Arya, and she watched as Brian led her onto the ship. "I wish you didn't have to go, Mother, but Arya, Bran, and Rickon will need you more than I will," Brynden said. Catelyn smiled. She wished she could be there for her sons when they needed her, but she knew that Brynden was right. Bran and Rickon were waiting at Winterfell for her return. They knew that she was coming, but she wondered how they would react when Arya would be with her. It had been so long since she had seen her two youngest boys. It was because of Brynden they were alive and well and the North was safe from the Ironborn. "I wish I could be here for you and Robb as well. Look after each other, will you, and try to not give your brother a hard time about the Westerlings." She knew that Brynden resented the Westerlings for causing Robb to break his pact with the Freys, and was glad that Jane was not here, for Catelyn knew her son would not be pleased to have her in his presence. Brynden had put up with Sir Reynold's presence to not start a scene in front of their lords. "No promises," Brynden frowned. "It should have been a Frey, Robb married, not a Westerling," Catelyn remembered Brynden telling her. "Robb is your king before he is your brother," Catelyn reminded him. "That means Jane is your queen, whether you want her to be or not." "I know that. Doesn't mean that I have to like it. None of us could have known what would have happened when Robb learned that Bran and Rickon were gone," Catelyn told him. "But they weren't. If only I had gotten to Winterfell sooner, all of this could have been avoided." Her son still blamed himself for Robb's folly with Jane. "There's nothing we can do about it now. What's done is done." Brynden smiled. "Like my bastard with Asher." Catelyn frowned when her son mentioned his bastard. Family, duty, honor, though the child was her son's bastard, the child was still part of her family. Unlike Jon Snow, the child was her blood, and she had promised Brynden she would help take care of his child when they were born. "We've been over this already," Catelyn said. "I know you still don't approve of my bastard, Mother." "I don't," Catelyn thought. She remembered a time when her son had vowed to never father a bastard. "You are your father's son," Caitlin told him. She wondered if Ned would approve of Bryndon's decision with his bastard, but dared not think about it. Instead she embraced her son and kept him wrapped in her arms, not wanting to let him go until it was time for her to board the ship. "They will all be back at Winterfell soon," Caitlin told herself as the ship set sail for home. Sandor Clegane was a big man, and the right side of his face was gaunt, with sharp cheekbones and a grey eye beneath a heavy brow. His nose was large and hooked, his hair thin, dark. He wore it long and brushed it sideways, because no hair grew on the other side of that face. Since the Hound had joined his household, Bryndon had taken the time to practice his swordplay with his new sworn sword. His sparring with the Hound reminded Bryndon of his time at Winterfell when he had sparred with Jon Snow. He had never been able to beat him, but Bryndon vowed the next time they met, he would be better than his brother. Bryndon remembered the first time he had met Clegane was at Winterfell when King Robert Baratheon had come to visit and name his father as the Hand of the King. The Hound had been with them in the courtyard the day Robb sparred with Joffrey. The Crown Prince barely knew how to use a sword and had barely landed any hits on Robb when they had sparred. It was then that the Hound had approached Sir Roderick when Joffrey had suggested using live steel and had wounded his brother's pride. Now that same man was Bryndon's sworn sword. He wondered what Robb would think of it when he found out about it. The Hound was not considered one of the most dangerous fighters in the Seven Kingdoms for nothing. As Bryndon had learned during their sparring in the courtyard. Bryndon was strong and quick for his age, but the Hound was stronger and had more experience in combat than he did. He landed some blows on the Hound, but Clegane landed more as he hammered him relentlessly while searching for an opening. There was none and Bryndon was soon defeated after he yielded. It was moments like this that Bryndon wished he had the swordsman skills Jon Snow had. Jon was a natural with the sword, and Bryndon had to train to become the swordsman he was now. Even now Bryndon wondered if he could hold his own against Jon and best him. No doubt his brother had also been training since he had gone to the wall and joined the Night's Watch. With all the enemies he and Robb would soon face when he returned from the Twins, Bryndon wondered if he would ever get the chance to see Jon again. Not for the first time, Bryndon wished that Robb would abandon the Riverlands. It was a lost cause to hold the Trident against the Lannisters and the Tyrells. Even if his great-uncle, the Blackfish, could hold the Trident against their enemies as his mother believed, Bryndon knew it would only be a matter of time before the Riverlands fell to the Lannisters. Throughout history when the Seven Kingdoms were divided, the Riverlands would always be held by a different king and fall to another. Their kingdom stood a better chance at surviving if they just held the north. Let the Southerners smash their armies against Moat Cailin. They would fail just like the Andals before them. The kings of winter had held the north for thousands of years against the south until the dragons came and conquered Westeros. They would be able to do the same if they abandoned the Riverlands, Bryndon was certain of it. His mother would not like it, but Bryndon was thinking about what was best for the north. The Riverlands would be their downfall. Their numbers would slowly dwindle while they tried to hold the Trident against the Iron Throne. If only Robb would have the sense to see that holding on to the Riverlands was hopeless with the numbers the Iron Throne now commanded. With Arya safely returned to them by Sandor Clegane, all that was left was getting Sansa back and securing their new kingdom. So long as Jaime did not have Robb's child, Bryndon was his brother's heir. From what his mother had told him, they had tried often, but with no success. Bryndon knew it would only be a matter of time before he would have to wed someone. No doubt it would be to some lady from a northern house. His marriage to Asha would never have worked out. Bryndon saw that now. Bryndon looked outside as the rain continued to fall. How long was this rain going to keep up? He wondered if Robb had made it to the Twins by now. They were lucky that the rain had died down for a bit so that his mother and Arya could set sail for the north. Bryndon was restless with doing nothing and wished there was something for him to do. If only Robb had let him accompany him to the Twins. Being at a wedding was better than sitting around and doing nothing. With nothing better to do, Bryndon decided to pay a visit to his prisoner's cell. It had been some time since he had last spoken to the Kingslayer. There was no need for them to speak to each other while they were in the north, for Bryndon had enjoyed the company of Asha as his bed warmer. Asha was at Winterfell though, and there weren't that many women here for him to choose from to fuck. Daisy Mormont might be beautiful to look at, but she was part of his guard and Brynden was not interested in taking her as his wife should he bed her and get her with a child. No doubt Lady Mormont would insist that he marry her if that were to happen. "Shadow, come," Brynden called out to his wolf as he made his way out of his chambers and to the dungeons. Guards were kept posted by the Kingslayer's cell day and night, and were ordered not to speak to him. He enjoyed leaving his prisoner in the dark of what was going on in the war as he had no doubt Sir Jaime worried over the fate of his family. The gaoler admitted Brynden into the Kingslayer's cell. 2 guards stood outside his cell. "Leave us," Brynden ordered. They bowed and took their leave. "My, isn't this a surprise?" Jaime asked when they were alone. He was fettered at wrist and ankle, each cuff chained to the others, so he could neither stand nor lie comfortably. The ankle chains were bolted to the wall. Brynden was taking no chances with this man. Even in his current state, the Kingslayer mocked his captors. "Am I being set free?" "No, you are not." As if they would trade him back to the Lannisters for just Sansa. "Then why are you here? Has there been any word from the capital or from my father?" "What of my sister?" "I have no doubt you take pleasure in leaving me in the dark with what's going on nowadays." "That I do," Brynden admitted. "To answer your first question, your father is at King's Landing, where he will no doubt stay till the new year, when King Joffrey takes for bride a daughter of Highgarden. At least Sansa no longer has to marry that cunt." While the lions were busy with the roses, Brynden and Robb would be sacking and razing the Iron Islands and Lannisport. If only Robb had taken Margaery as his wife instead of Jane, this war with the Lannisters would be over and Highgarden would be their allies. "Whatever happened to my nephew being betrothed to your sister?" The Battle of the Blackwater seemed to have changed all of that. The Rose and the Lion joined there, to shatter Stannis Baratheon's host and burn his fleet to ashes. And with it their hope of a Baratheon king sitting on the Iron Throne instead of a Lannister one. If his uncle Edmure had not engaged Lord Tywin's host on the fords, Brynden was certain Stannis would be sitting on the Iron Throne instead of Joffrey, and the heads of the Lannisters would be on spikes. They would have been able to negotiate with Stannis if he was on the Iron Throne. "And my sister?" Jaime asked. "She is well, though I wish that she wasn't. As is your nephew. The Imp also lives, though he took a wound in the battle." It was hard for Brynden to imagine that dwarf he had met at Winterfell could lead an army into battle. Obviously he had underestimated him. "You and your brother must be feeling lonely." "Not as lonely as you might think," Kingslayer Brynden told him. "You may have ships and men, but it won't be enough to defeat my father, as Stannis Baratheon learned when he tried to take King's Landing. You underestimate us and that will be your downfall." Brynden took his leave and had the guards put back on duty before leaving the dungeons. Once he was back in his chambers, Brynden sat at his desk and flipped over one of his leather-bound books of maps and opened it to the Riverlands. His eyes found the Twins and traced it down to Old Stones. He was now certain that Robb was at the Twins already and was probably getting ready for their uncle Edmure's wedding to Roslyn Frey. Brynden wondered what kind of reception Robb and his men would get from the Freys when they reached the Twins. He wouldn't be surprised if Robb didn't receive a warm welcome after his folly with Jane Westerling. Robb had spurned their allies when he had taken Jane as his wife and queen. That Sir Reynold should not have accompanied Robb as the Freys would not be pleased by his presence, as Brynden was when he met him. It was not that Brynden hated the Westerlings, for they were now part of his family, whether he wanted them to be or not, but he could not tolerate them for they were once sworn to their enemies, the Lannisters. They reminded Brynden of his failure for not arriving at Winterfell in time and informing Robb that their brothers were alive and well. Robb slept with Jane in despair over the loss of their brothers, not knowing that the ones Theon had put to the sword were false. It had been the same with Asha for Brynden, but at least he had the sense not to wed her soon after he had bedded her. Flipping the pages of the maps over to the Westerlands, Brynden stared at Lannisport. That was where Robb planned to attack while Brynden led the invasion of the Iron Islands. He wondered if the same trick Victorian Greyjoy had used when he had burned Tywin Lannister's fleet during Greyjoy's rebellion would work with them, given that the Lannister forces in the west were scattered since Robb's victory at Oxcross. With the Tyrells allied with the Lannisters, however, Brynden knew they would also have to soon face the Redwyne fleet in the sea. They controlled the Sunset Sea for now, and with the royal fleet of the Iron Throne annihilated in the Blackwater, the Redwyne fleet was the only fleet at sea that could now stop their new fleet. The Red Wine fleet would most likely be sent to deal with Stannis on Dragonstone once Joffrey was wedded to the Tyrell bride before they were sent to deal with their fleet. He wondered how Robb planned to deal with the Red Wines once the Iron Islands and Lannisport were dealt with. There was nothing he could do about it now though. Planning for their future battles would have to wait until after Robb returned from Edmure's wedding to Roslyn Free. In the end it would be up to Robb to decide what their next plan of attack would be, for he was his king. He just hoped that Robb wouldn't cause any more follies that they would have to clean up. They can't afford to make any more mistakes with their enemies growing in numbers. For now all he could do was wait for his brother's return from the twins. The drums were pounding, 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 and pipes wailed and flutes trilled from the musicians' gallery at the foot of the hall, fiddles screeched, horns blew, the skins skirled a lively tune, but the drumming drove them all. The sounds echoed off the rafters, whilst the guests ate, drank, and shouted at one another below. Outside the rain still fell, but within the twins the air was thick and hot. A fire roared in the hearth and rows of torches burned smokily from iron sconces on the walls. Yet most of the heat came off the bodies of the wedding guests, jammed in so thick along the benches that every man who tried to lift his cup poked his neighbor in the ribs. Despite the festive mood in the hall, Robb could not help but brood over the loss of Lord Roose Bolton and his 3,000 men. It was Sir Innes Free who had informed Robb of the loss. Lannisters were on the Trident, Sir Innes told him. The river was a torrent by the time we made it to the Trident at the Ruby Ford and tried to cross. We had no choice but to ferry men across in small boats, of which we had too few. Most of mine were already across when the Lannisters attacked those on the other side. Lord Roose Bolton rallied his men as best he could, but Gregor Clegane and Lord Randall Tarly attacked with heavy horse and drove them into the river. As many drowned as were cut down. More fled, and the rest were taken captive. I saw Lord Bolton get cut down by the Mountain. Sooner or later he would have to deal with the Mountain when they were through with the Ironborn and Lannisport. Is Clegane across the river, then? He had asked. No, Sir Innes had replied. I left a few hundred men at the ford. Sir Pewin and Oliver were among the Freys we left behind. So long as the river runs high, Sir Gregor will not cross. Now he only had 500 men with him at the twins. Heeding his mother's advice, Robb had asked for bread and salt and Lord Walder had granted his hospitality. The audience with Lord Walder had not been as painful as he feared, yet all the same he would be glad to be done with this. Once his uncle was wed, Robb would join Brynden and his other lords at Seaguard to mount an attack on their enemies with the ships his brother had captured. The wedding feast began with a thin leek soup, followed by a salad of green beans, onions, and beets, river pike poached in almond milk, mounds of mashed turnips that were cold before they reached the table, jellied calf's brains, and a lush of stringy beef. Yet Robb ate it uncomplaining, and his uncle was too caught up with his bride to pay much attention. Husband and wife ate from a single plate, drank from a single cup, and exchanged chaste kisses between sips. Most of the dishes his uncle waved away. Poor Roslyn's smile had a fixed quality to it, as if someone had sewn it onto her face. Robb was seated between Alex Free and Fair Walder, two of the more nubile Free maidens. At the wedding feast I hope you will not refuse to dance with my daughters, Walder Free had said. It would please an old man's heart. He had danced with each of the girls, with Edmure's bride and the 8th Lady Free, with the widow Amy and Roose Bolton's widow Fat Walder, with the pimply twins Sarah and Sarah, even with Shire, Lord Walder's youngest, who must have been all of 6. Sir Wendell Marndaly and Robin Flint sat near Robb, to the other side of Fair Walder and Alex, respectively. Neither of them was drinking, along with Patrek Mallister and Owen Norrie, they were his guards this evening. A wedding feast was not a battle, but there were always dangers when men were in their cups, and a king should never be unguarded. The musicians in the gallery might be numerous and loud, but they were not especially gifted. A few more hours, and the worst will be over. By this hour tomorrow he would be off to another battle, this time he would take the fight to the Lannisters. He would not lose, Robb vowed. The drums were pounding. Above the din came a sudden snarling as 2 dogs fell upon each other over a scrap of meat. They rolled across the floor, snapping and biting, as a howl of mirth went up. Someone doused them with a flagon of ale and they broke apart. One limped toward the dais. Lord Walder's toothless mouth opened in a bark of laughter as the dripping wet dog shook ale and hair all over 3 of his grandsons. The sight of the dogs made Robb wish once more for Grey Wind, but his wolf was nowhere to be seen. Lord Walder had refused to allow him in the hall. "Your wild beast has a taste for human flesh, I hear," the old man had said. "Rips out throats, yes. I'll have no such creature at my Roslyn's feast, amongst women and little ones, all my sweet innocents." "Grey Wind is no danger to them, my lord," Rob protested. "Not so long as I am there. You were there at my gates, were you not? When the wolf attacked the grandsons I sent to greet you. I heard all about that, don't think I didn't, hey? No harm was done." "No harm, the king says. No harm. Petter fell from his horse, fell. I lost a wife the same way, falling." His mouth worked in and out. "Or was she just some strumpet? Bastard Walder's mother, yes, now I recall. She fell off her horse and cracked her head. What would your grace do if Petter had broken his neck, hey? Give me another apology in place of a grandson." "No, no, no. Might be your king, I won't say you're not, the king in the north, hey, but under my roof, my rule. Have your wolf or have your wedding, sire. You'll not have both." Rob was furious, but he yielded with as much courtesy as he could summon. He should have left Grey Wind with Brynden at Seaguard, but there was nothing he could do about it now. This would all be over soon and Grey Wind would be by his side when he went into battle. The cramped hall was in a constant uproar of guests and servants coming and going. A second feast, for knights and lords of somewhat lesser rank, was roaring along in the other castle, he knew. Lord Walder had exiled his base-born children and their offspring to that side of the river, so that his Northmen had taken to referring to it as the Bastard Feast. Some guests were no doubt stealing off to see if the bastards were having a better time than they were. Some might even be venturing as far as the camps. The Freys had provided wagons of wine, ale and mead, so the common soldiers could drink to the wedding of Riverrun and the twins. Edmure was kissing Roslyn and squeezing her hand. Elsewhere in the hall, Sir Mark Piper and Sir Dan Wilfrey played a drinking game. Lame Lothar said something amusing to Sir Hostine, one of the younger Freys juggled 3 daggers for a group of giggly girls, and Jingle Bell sat on the floor sucking wine off his fingers. The servers were bringing out huge silver platters piled high with cuts of juicy pink lamb, the most appetizing dish they'd seen all evening. Seated betwixt his black oak towers, the Lord of the Crossing clapped his spotted hands together. The noise they made was so faint that even those on the dais scarce heard it, but Sir Innes and Sir Hostine saw and began to pound their cups on the table. Lame Lothar joined them, then Mark Piper and Sir Danwil and Sir Raymond. Half the guests were soon pounding. Finally even the mob of musicians in the gallery took note. The piping, drumming, and fiddling trailed off into quiet. "Your Grace," Lord Walder called out to Rob, "the Septon has prayed his prayers, some words have been said, and Lord Edmure's wrapped my sweeterling in a fish cloak, but they are not yet man and wife. A sword needs a sheath, and a wedding needs a bedding. What does my sire say? Is it meet that we should bed them?" A score or more of Walder Frey's sons and grandsons began to bang their cups again, shouting, "To bed! To bed! To bed with them!" Roslyn had gone white. Rob raised a hand. "If you think the time is meet, Lord Walder, by all means let us bed them." A roar of approval greeted his pronouncement. Up in the gallery the musicians took up their pipes and horns and fiddles again, and began to play. The Queen took off her sandal, the King took off his crown. Jingle Bell hopped from foot to foot, his own crown ringing. "I hear Tully men have trout between their legs instead of cocks," Alex Frey called out boldly. "Does it take a worm to make them rise?" To which Sir Mark Piper threw back, "I hear that free women have 2 gates in place of 1, and Alex said, "Aye, but both are closed and barred to little things like you." A gust of laughter followed, until Patrick Mallister climbed up onto a table to propose a toast to Edmure's one-eyed fish. "And a mighty pike it is," he proclaimed. Then the general cry of "Bed them! Bed them!" went up again. The guests swarmed the dais, the drunkest in the forefront as ever. The men and boys surrounded Roslyn and lifted her into the air whilst the maids and mothers in the hall pulled Edmure to his feet and began tugging at his clothing. He was laughing and shouting bawdy jokes back at them, though the music was too loud for Rob to hear. As man and maid were carried from the hall, a trail of clothing behind them, Rob remained behind. He knew that he should have joined in Roslyn's bedding, but at the moment he was wishing that Jane were here, but he had left his wife at Riverrun at his mother's insistence. Rob saw that others had remained behind as well. Lord Ricard Carstark no doubt believed this wedding to be a waste of time, and Peter Pimple, Sir Waylan, and Meret Free were pouring themselves a cup of wine, while Jingle Bell wandered about stealing bites off the plates of those who'd left. Sir Wendell Mondaly was lustily attacking a leg of lamb. And of course Lord Walder was far too feeble to leave his seat without help. The drums were pounding again, pounding and pounding and pounding. The players in the gallery had finally gotten both king and queen down to their name-day suits. With scarcely a moment's respite, they began to play a very different sort of song. No one sang the words, but Rob recognized the reigns of Castamaria when he heard it. Rob saw Edwin Free hurrying toward a door and wondered what he was up to. "And who are you?" the proud lord said, "that I must bow so low?"